The knife came out of nowhere. 1 second, Evelyn Hayes was rolling toward the podium in front of 400 investors, the most powerful woman in the room by every measurable standard. The next second, a man in a hotel uniform lunged at her from the left side of the stage, blade already open, arm already moving. Her bodyguards were still turning around when it was over. The man who stopped it wasn't a bodyguard. He wasn't security. He wasn't even supposed to be in that part of the hotel. He was the janitor everyone had been laughing at all morning. If a story like this hits different for you, the kind where the person nobody notices turns out to be the person who matters most, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to the channel right now and hit the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. Drop a like on this video and tell me in the comments what city and country you're watching from. I put everything into these stories and I genuinely want to know how far they've traveled. Now settle in. This one's going to stay with you. The Meridian Grand Hotel had 42 floors, 11 conference rooms, 3 restaurants, and a rooftop bar that charged $22 for a glass of sparkling water. It had hosted foreign dignitaries, a former U.S. Secretary of State, 2 Oscar ceremonies for a film production company that rented the entire East Wing, and more corporate summits than the general manager could count without pulling up a spreadsheet. The hotel prided itself on discretion, on polish, on the kind of seamless invisibility that made wealthy guests feel like the world ran perfectly as long as they didn't look too closely at the machinery behind it. Logan Carter was part of that machinery. He had worked the early shift at the Meridian Grand for 2 years, 3 months, and, as of that Tuesday morning, 11 days. He clocked in at 5:45 a.m., collected his cart from the supply room on sublevel 2, and started his route on the 4th floor before most guests had opened their eyes. By the time the breakfast buffet opened in the Halcyon Ballroom, he'd already cleaned 9 restrooms, restocked 4 supply closets, handled a biohazard situation in room 412 that he would spend the rest of the morning trying not to think about, and mopped a 40-foot stretch of marble corridor twice, because a catering crew had tracked in what appeared to be melted chocolate from the service entrance. He did the work without complaint. That was just how he was built. At 37, Logan didn't look like much at first glance. Medium height, medium build, the kind of face that didn't announce itself, brown eyes, a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in 4 days, a small scar above his left eyebrow that he never explained to anyone. His gray coveralls had his name stitched on the left chest pocket in blue thread, though the embroidery had faded enough that it now read Loga. He'd noticed that 3 months ago and hadn't said anything to anyone about getting it fixed. It didn't seem worth the conversation. He pushed his cart past the ballroom entrance just after 8 a.m. and paused, because the setup crew had left a folded tablecloth in the middle of the hallway. Not a safety hazard exactly, but the kind of thing that became one fast when 500 people started moving through a corridor. He picked it up, tucked it under his arm, and kept moving. Through the ballroom's open double doors, he could see the stage crew running cables for the afternoon presentation. Enormous screens, a custom podium built low to accommodate a wheelchair, microphone stands being tested and retested by a sound tech who looked like he hadn't slept since Saturday. The whole room was being dressed like a set, and in a way, Logan supposed, that's exactly what it was. The Meridian Grand Healthcare and Innovation Summit was a 2-day event that drew somewhere around 400 attendees, investors, hospital executives, pharmaceutical representatives, medical device manufacturers, venture capital firms, and the various consultants and assistants and media people who orbited all of them. It was the kind of event where the lanyards had 3 different colors depending on your clearance level, and where the people with the red lanyards moved through the hotel like they owned it, because, in various practical senses, they kind of did. Logan wore no lanyard. He had a staff badge clipped to his breast pocket, photo ID, sub-level access, maintenance authorization, but it was the kind of badge that nobody looked at. That was fine. He wasn't there to be looked at. Evelyn Hayes arrived at 9:12 a.m. in a black SUV that pulled directly into the Meridian Grand's private underground entrance. Logan didn't see her arrive. He was on the 3rd floor when it happened, replacing a burned-out bulb in a supply alcove. But he heard the shift in energy the moment she entered the building. That particular hush that moved through a hotel staff like a wave, the way everyone straightened their posture by half an inch without realizing it. He'd heard her name, of course. Everyone had. Evelyn Hayes, 30 years old, CEO of Novatech Medical, a company she'd built from a graduate school thesis into a billion-dollar operation in under 7 years. Spinal cord injury from a car accident at 24 had put her in a wheelchair permanently, and she'd spent the years since moving faster in that chair than most people moved on 2 legs. The business press loved her. The tech press loved her. She had been on the cover of 3 national magazines in the past 18 months and had declined to appear on a 4th because she didn't like the angle of the interview questions. Logan had no particular opinion about her. She was a guest. A high-profile guest who would generate a lot of foot traffic and require his floor to be clean and stay clean. That was the extent of his professional relationship with Evelyn Hayes as of 9/12 that morning. That would change. The summit's first panel started at 10 a.m. in the Halcyon Ballroom, and by 9:50, the corridors were filling up. Logan worked his way methodically through the 4th-floor hallway, emptying waste bins, wiping down elevator buttons, keeping his cart close to the wall so the red lanyard crowd could move freely. He had learned early in this job that the best version of himself, from the hotel's perspective, was one that people didn't have to navigate around. He was outside the service elevator when he saw the man. Not that there was anything immediately wrong about him. He was dressed in hotel staff attire, white shirt, black trousers, a laminate badge on a lanyard, and he was carrying a conference supply box, the kind catering and AV crews used all the time. He was moving at the right pace. Not too fast, not too slow. His expression was neutral in the practiced way of someone trying to look unremarkable. Logan noticed him the way he noticed most things, without meaning to and without being able to stop himself. The box. The man was carrying it wrong. He had both arms wrapped around the bottom of it, forearms parallel to the floor, wrists slightly inward, the kind of grip you used for something heavier than conference supplies. A box of lanyards and printed programs would be carried loosely, one hand tilted. This box was being held the way you held something you didn't want to shift inside. Logan watched the man turn left at the corridor junction and disappear toward the North Service stairwell. He stood there for a moment with his hand on his cart. Probably nothing, he told himself. He kept working. He saw the camera 20 minutes later. He only noticed because it was his job to notice things like misaligned fixtures, loose panels, burned lights, broken tiles, anything that needed a maintenance request. The security camera mounted above the secondary ballroom entrance on the north corridor was tilted 8 degrees off its standard axis. Not dramatically. Not enough that most people would catch it. But Logan had walked that corridor 5 days a week for 2 years, and he knew exactly where that camera pointed, and right now it was pointing at a stretch of ceiling instead of the door beneath it. He stopped. He looked at the camera for a long moment. Then he looked at the door it was no longer watching. The door was a secondary service entrance to the ballroom, used by catering, AV, and maintenance during setup, but typically locked and alarmed during event hours. Logan crouched, checked the door frame. The magnetic latch indicator light that should have been red was dark. The door looked closed. It wasn't latched. He straightened up and stood very still. The man with the box. The wrong grip. The North Service stairwell. The camera tilted away. The door unlatched. Logan had spent 11 years in the United States Navy, the last 7 of those with SEAL Team 8. He had operated in environments where the difference between a suspicious detail and a catastrophic one was measured in seconds. He had learned, through training, through experience, through the kinds of situations he didn't talk about at hotel staff meetings, that when 3 things are wrong simultaneously, a 4th thing is always coming. He pulled out his phone and called hotel security. The security desk on sublevel 1 was manned by a rotating team of 4 officers. The one who answered Logan's call was a man named Derek, who had worked hotel security for 9 years and had very firm opinions about the appropriate channels for reporting concerns. "What's your badge number?" Derek asked. "MT1147. Logan Carter, maintenance. I'm on 4 North, outside the secondary ballroom." "Okay, and what's the issue?" "Security camera above the secondary ballroom entrance is off-axis. The door beneath it isn't latched. And I saw a staff member, maybe 25 minutes ago, heading into the North Service stairwell, carrying a box with a grip that didn't match the weight. There was a pause. The grip, Derek repeated. Yes. You're calling to report a grip. Logan kept his voice level. I'm calling to report 3 anomalies in the same location 60 minutes before the keynote presentation. I think someone's been in that stairwell. I'll have someone check the camera. Can someone also check the stairwell and verify the door is secured before the keynote? Sir, I appreciate you keeping an eye out, but we've got a full security team on this event. VIP protocols, the whole package. If there was something wrong with that door, the advanced sweep would have caught it. When was the advanced sweep? Another pause, longer this time. 6 a.m. It's 10:17, Logan said. Look, I'll log your concern and pass it along to the shift supervisor. But I need you to let us do our jobs, okay? You do maintenance, we do security. That's how this works. Logan lowered the phone. He looked at the unlatched door. He looked at the camera pointing at nothing. He thought about walking away. He was very good at walking away. He'd been practicing for years. He didn't walk away. At 10:30, he found the emergency exit. The North Service stairwell connected to an emergency exit on the far end of the 4th floor, a push-bar door that should have been alarmed and deadlocked from the outside. Logan went up the stairwell, moving quietly out of habit, and found the door with a rubber wedge jammed under its base, not visible from the hallway, not visible from the stairwell unless you went all the way up. The alarm had been physically bypassed, a strip of black electrical tape over the contact sensor, the kind of fix that was crude but effective if you did it before anyone was paying attention. He stood in the stairwell and felt the quiet drop through him like cold water. Someone had done prep work on this building, real prep work. The camera, the door, the exit. Those weren't accidents or maintenance failures. Those were 3 points of a planned route: entry, access, escape. He thought about calling Derek again and dismissed it immediately. He thought about Evelyn Hayes, who at this exact moment was somewhere in this building preparing to walk into a room with 400 people and no idea that the building's security layer had been quietly taken apart around her. Logan went back down the stairs. Caught. He found the event's head of security near the ballroom entrance, a broad man in a dark suit named Garrett, who wore an earpiece and the particular expression of someone managing too many variables at once. Logan had seen him running the advance team the day before, brisk and thorough, and clearly competent. That was fine. Competent people could still be wrong. I need 2 minutes, Logan said. Garrett looked at him, at his coveralls, at his cart, at the faded name tag, and something shifted behind his eyes. Not contempt exactly, more like the automatic recalibration people did when they decided what category you belonged in. The maintenance staff entrance is around the corner, Garrett said, already looking past him. I'm not lost. I need to tell you something about your security perimeter. Garrett's attention came back. Excuse me? The secondary ballroom entrance on 4 North has a manipulated camera and an unlatched door. The emergency exit in the North Service stairwell has been bypassed with electrical tape over the contact sensor. I also observed a male staff member approximately 40 minutes ago carrying a weighted load through that stairwell using a 2-arm grip inconsistent with conference supplies. Garrett stared at him. Who are you? He asked. Logan Carter, maintenance MT1147. And you're telling me someone's compromised my perimeter? I'm telling you what I found. What you do with it is your call. Garrett studied him for another moment. Logan could see the calculation happening, the same calculation Derek had done, the same one everyone in this building had run since the moment they'd seen the coveralls. Who is this guy, and why would I listen to him? I'll have someone check it, Garrett said finally. When? Before the keynote. The keynote starts in 22 minutes. I'm aware of when the keynote starts. Logan nodded once and stepped back. He'd done what he could do. He'd told 2 people. He'd given them the information. It wasn't his building, wasn't his event, wasn't his job. He had a cart full of cleaning supplies and a 4th floor that needed finishing, and a 7-year-old daughter named Maya, who is at school right now drawing pictures and probably thinking about what she wanted for dinner. He grabbed the handle of his cart. He didn't move. The thing about instinct, real instinct, the kind that gets trained into you over years and circumstances that would put most people on the floor, is that it doesn't politely wait for you to be ready. It doesn't ask whether you have the bandwidth. It just fires, quiet and certain, and you either listen to it or you spend the rest of your life explaining to yourself why you didn't. Logan had walked away from his old life because he'd had to. Because after Sarah died, the only thing that mattered was Maya, and Maya needed a father who came home, who made breakfast, who sat through school plays and didn't jump at car backfires. He'd traded the uniform for the coveralls and he didn't regret it. He didn't miss it most days. Most days. He stood outside the ballroom and watched the last of the attendees filing in. He watched Garrett's team at the entrance, crisp and professional and completely absorbed in their visible perimeter. He looked down the corridor toward the north service door, which was still, from this angle, perfectly unremarkable. He thought about the man with the box. He thought about the electrical tape over the alarm contact. He thought about a woman he'd never spoken to, rolling toward a stage in front of 400 people, not knowing what Logan knew. Logan Carter left his cart against the wall. He rolled his sleeves down, buttoned the collar of his coveralls, and walked toward the north corridor, not because anyone had asked him to, not because it was his job, and not because he expected anything good to come from it for himself. He walked because he still knew, somewhere in the part of him that 11 years of service had permanently rewired, that some things couldn't be walked away from. And because if he was right about what was coming, there wasn't going to be time for anyone else to stop it. The north corridor was empty when Logan reached it. That was the first thing he noticed. Not the camera, not the door, but the emptiness. At 10:40, on a conference morning with 400 people stuffed into the ballroom 50 feet away, this hallway should have had at least some foot traffic. Catering staff wrapping up, AV techs doing last checks, someone from hotel operations doing a walkthrough. Instead, there was nothing, just the low hum of the ventilation system and the muffled sound of a microphone being tested through the ballroom wall. Logan slowed his walk without stopping it. He'd learned a long time ago that running towards something that might be dangerous was how you announced yourself to the wrong people. You moved like you belonged. You moved like you had a reason to be there that was completely ordinary, and you kept your eyes working the whole time. He checked the secondary ballroom door as he passed. Still unlatched. The camera above it was still tilted at its useless angle, watching the ceiling do nothing. He kept moving. The north service stairwell door had a small rectangular window set into it at eye level, reinforced glass with wire mesh running through it. Logan stopped beside it, angled himself against the wall, and looked through. The stairwell beyond was a gray concrete shaft, industrial, functional, stripped of the hotel's carefully maintained aesthetic. A single fluorescent tube flickered on the landing below. The stairs going up were dark. He didn't see anyone. He pushed the door open with his shoulder and went in. The stairwell smelled like concrete dust and something else, something faintly chemical that didn't belong, that sat underneath the dust smell the way a splinter sits underneath skin. Logan stood on the landing and breathed it in and didn't move for a full 5 seconds, just listening. Ventilation. The distant thrum of the building's mechanical systems 3 floors below. A water pipe doing something rhythmic in the wall. Nothing that sounded like a person. He went up. The 4th floor landing connected to the emergency exit he'd found before, the one with the electrical tape and the rubber wedge. He crouched and checked the wedge. It hadn't moved. The tape was still in place. The door was still cracked open less than half an inch, enough to prevent the latch from engaging, not enough to be visible from outside unless you were right on top of it. He pressed his palm flat against the door and felt nothing. No vibration, no pressure from the other side. He pushed it open and stepped out onto the hotel's 4th floor exterior access walkway. It was a narrow concrete ledge that ran along the building's north face, meant for window washing crews and external maintenance. The morning air hit him cold and sharp, and below, 40 feet down, was the hotel's delivery courtyard. A catering truck was parked near the service gate. A man in kitchen whites was smoking near the loading dock. Logan scanned the walkway in both directions. Empty. He went back inside and stood on the landing for a moment. The man with the box had come into this stairwell. Logan was certain of that. What he wasn't certain of was where the man had gone, or whether he'd already left, or whether Logan was standing in a stairwell getting worked up over a hotel employee who'd taken a wrong turn with a box of conference pamphlets. He considered that possibility seriously for about 4 seconds. Then he went down. Tut-tut. The second-floor landing had a utility door that Logan had used maybe a dozen times in 2 years. It connected to the hotel's secondary electrical room and a network of maintenance corridors that ran behind the ballroom's north wall. The utility door was kept locked with a keypad. Logan had the access code because his job occasionally required it. He punched it in and pushed through. The maintenance corridor was narrow, barely 3 feet wide, concrete floor, exposed conduit overhead, service lighting every 10 feet. It smelled like electrical insulation and old pipework. Logan moved through it carefully, eyes forward, listening. 20 feet in, he stopped. The conference supply box was sitting on the floor against the right wall. The flaps were folded back. Inside were 2 compressed gas canisters, a coil of black wire, and what appeared to be a modified wireless transmitter. Logan looked at it for a long moment without touching anything. He was not an explosives expert. He had worked alongside people who were, in conditions and locations he wasn't going to think about right now in a hotel maintenance corridor. But he knew enough to know what he was looking at wasn't conference supplies, and he knew enough to know he should not touch it, and he knew enough to know that the time for calling Derek in hotel security was approximately 4 hours ago. He pulled out his phone. No signal. The maintenance corridor was wrapped in concrete and metal and whatever the hell the hotel had used to insulate the ballroom walls. He turned around and moved back toward the utility door, faster now but still controlled, still quiet, because the man who had left that box might still be somewhere in this corridor, and Logan was not, in this context, without a weapon, without backup, without any of the things that had once made him very difficult to kill, interested in announcing himself. He made it back to the stairwell and had his phone to his ear before the door had swung shut behind him. He called 911, but he had to give the dispatcher the hotel address twice because the woman on the other end was trying to determine whether his call was a prank or a legitimate emergency, which was a reasonable concern given that his opening sentence had been, "I found what I believe is a device in the maintenance corridor of a hotel where a live event is currently in progress." "Sir, can you describe what you saw?" 2 compressed canisters, coiled wire, a wireless transmitter, modified setup. Sitting in an open box in the maintenance corridor behind the Halcyon Ballroom at the Meridian Grand Hotel, 4400 Westbrook Avenue. "Are you currently in the location?" "I'm in the service stairwell on 2 North. The event in the ballroom has already started. There are approximately 400 people in that room." "Okay, sir, I need you to stay on the line. I'm dispatching units now. Can you tell me your name?" "Logan Carter. I'm a maintenance employee. Hotel security is already aware of a perimeter concern, but I don't believe they've acted on it." "Sir, please do not re-enter the area where you found the device." "Understood." He stayed on the line. Through the concrete walls he could hear, faintly, a voice through a PA system. The panel moderator in the ballroom beginning introductions. The keynote was starting. Evelyn Hayes was in that room right now, and the device was in the wall behind it, and the man who'd put it there was somewhere in this building. Logan's mind ran the sequence. The device, if it was what he thought it was positioned for effect, not structural damage. The canisters were small. The setup suggested dispersal, not blast, which meant whoever had planned this wasn't trying to bring down a wall. They were trying to clear a room, or clear a path. He thought about that for 3 seconds and then said, "I need to stay near the ballroom entrance," to the dispatcher, who told him firmly that he needed to stay where he was and wait for police. He told her he understood, which was true, and that he would wait, which was not entirely true, and ended the call. He came out of the stairwell and moved down the corridor toward the ballroom entrance at a pace that was faster than walking and slower than running, the kind of speed that looks purposeful without looking panicked, which in a hotel full of event staff was the precise speed to be moving if you didn't want to be stopped and questioned. Garrett was near the main ballroom doors, earpiece in, arms crossed, doing the professional scan that security people do when they want to look like they're monitoring everything. He saw Logan coming, and his expression shifted immediately into the particular blankness of someone deciding whether to be annoyed. "I called 911, Logan said before Garrett could speak. "You what?" "There's a device in the maintenance corridor behind the north wall of the ballroom. 2 compressed canisters, wire, transmitter. Police are on the way. You need to start a quiet evacuation right now." Garrett stared at him. "You called What do you mean there's a device? What kind of device? I don't know exactly, but it's not supposed to be there, and the person who put it there went to significant effort to manipulate your security perimeter to do it. The camera on 4 North, the unlatched door, the emergency exit bypass, those weren't accidents. Someone planned access to that corridor. You went into the maintenance corridor? Garrett's voice had an edge to it now. Not quite anger, but close. You went into a restricted area and disturbed possible evidence. I didn't touch it. I looked and I left. Garrett. Logan said his name deliberately because people responded to their own names when they were about to make a decision they'd regret. There are 400 people in that room, and the keynote just started. If I'm wrong, you lose 20 minutes and you're annoyed at a janitor. If I'm right and you wait, you lose a lot more than that. Garrett held the stare for a moment. He was a professional. Logan could see him working through it. The cost of acting on incomplete information from an unauthorized source versus the cost of not acting. Stay here, Garrett said. He pressed his earpiece and stepped away, voice dropping into the clipped cadence of someone giving instructions fast. Logan watched the ballroom doors. Through them, just barely audible, he could hear applause. Inside the ballroom, Evelyn Hayes was trying to listen to the panel moderator introduce her without visibly calculating how many things she still had to review in her presentation notes. She'd been awake since 4:30. Not because of anxiety, she'd stopped calling it anxiety 2 years ago, after her therapist pointed out that she was actually just processing at high speed and needed to stop pathologizing her own brain, but because the keynote represented 6 months of work compressed into 45 minutes, and she wanted it right. Not polished. Right. There was a difference. Her wheelchair was positioned at the side of the stage, wheels locked, her portfolio open on her lap with the last 2 pages turned down at the corners. Around her, the production team moved with the quiet efficiency of people who knew better than to talk to the speaker in the final minutes. Her assistant, a 26-year-old named Priya, who had the organizational instincts of someone twice her age and the coffee tolerance of someone with a serious problem, was standing 3 feet away holding a tablet and pretending not to hover. Stop hovering, Evelyn said without looking up. I'm not hovering, I'm standing. You're hovering while standing. It's a specific posture. Priya lowered the tablet by 2 inches. The streaming link is confirmed live. We've got solid numbers already from the remote viewers. Good. Evelyn turned the last page, looked at the final slide. Thought about whether the closing line landed the way she wanted it to, or whether it was going to sound like something she'd read in a business book, which it absolutely was not, but tone was everything and she'd been second-guessing it since Tuesday. Evelyn? Priya's voice changed. Not alarmed, but something. Evelyn looked up. 2 of Garrett's security staff were moving through the room along the far wall. Not urgently, but with the particular focused economy of movement that was different from their normal ballroom patrol. One of them had his hand to his earpiece. What's happening? Evelyn asked quietly. I don't know. Priya was already watching. Security thing, maybe. The panel moderator was wrapping up the introduction. Evelyn heard her own name and a list of her accomplishments delivered in the enthusiastic cadence of someone who'd read the bio card twice and was genuinely trying. Applause started building. Somewhere at the back of the room, a camera operator adjusted position. Evelyn straightened in her chair, closed her portfolio, and set it on the seat beside her. She rolled toward the stage. Logan saw Garrett's second officer, a compact woman named Reyes who moved like she ran track on weekends, come out of the side corridor and shake her head at Garrett from across the lobby. She hadn't found anyone in the maintenance area, or she hadn't found the right area, or she'd looked and not known what she was looking for. Garrett came back to Logan. My people are doing a sweep. The box is in the secondary maintenance corridor, 20 feet from the utility door on 2 North. If your people know what they're looking for, they're trained. Are they trained for modified dispersal devices with compressed canisters? Because that's a specific training track and not every security team. Carter. Garrett said it the way people said a name when they wanted to end a sentence. I hear you. We're on it. Logan looked at the ballroom doors. Where's Hayes right now? He asked. Garrett's jaw tightened slightly. That's not your concern. Is she on stage? Logan, is she on stage, yes or no? Because if she's already up there, then the device placement starts to make a different kind of sense, and you need to know that. Something shifted in Garrett's face. He pressed his earpiece again. Martinez, where's the principal? A pause. Copy. He lowered his hand. She just went up. Logan was already moving toward the ballroom doors. Hey! Garrett was right behind him. You are not going in there. You've got a device that I think is a diversion and a principal on stage and a man I haven't been able to locate since I saw him go into that stairwell 40 minutes ago. Let me in the room. You are a maintenance worker. I used to be something else. Garrett stopped. The way he stopped said he'd heard something in Logan's voice that recalibrated things slightly. He looked at Logan, not at the coveralls this time, but at Logan's face, at his hands, at the way he was standing. What does that mean? Garrett asked. It means I know how this kind of setup works, and I know where to look. Let me in the room. You can have 2 of your people on me the whole time if that makes you feel better. A long pause. Through the ballroom doors, Logan could hear the crowd settling. A woman's voice, steady, clear, commanding without effort. Evelyn Hayes had started talking. Garrett made a decision. You stay near the side wall. You don't approach the stage. You see something. You tell me. You don't act. Are we clear? Clear, Logan said. Garrett pushed the door open, and they went in. The room was full and warm and dark except for the stage lights, which were pointed at Evelyn Hayes with the precision of people who understood that the subject of the light mattered. She sat at the custom low podium, composed and still, and she spoke without notes in the way of someone who had lived inside the material long enough that it had become part of how they thought. Logan took in none of what she was saying. He was scanning the room. 400 people in a seated layout, round tables, 8 to a table. Staff positioned at 4 points around the perimeter, 2 of Garrett's people near the stage, 1 at the main entrance, 1 at the far service door. The screens behind Evelyn showed Novatech's latest device prototype. The room smelled like coffee and expensive cologne and the particular warmth of too many bodies in an enclosed space. Logan moved along the left wall, eyes tracking. He found the man 7 minutes later. He was seated at a table near the center left section, not staff, guest attire, dark jacket, conference lanyard. Logan hadn't seen his face clearly in the stairwell, but he'd seen the grip, and he'd seen the walk, and the walk was the same. There's a particular economy of movement that certain kinds of training produce, a stillness that isn't relaxation, a readiness that doesn't announce itself. And this man had it. He was watching the stage with the focused attention of someone waiting for a specific moment. Logan clocked the man's hands under the table, right hand curled slightly, left hand flat. He pressed back against the wall and found Garrett with his eyes across the room. He couldn't signal him without drawing the man's attention. He pulled out his phone and typed fast. Center left table section, dark jacket, lanyard. Watch his right hand. Don't approach from front. He sent it to the number Garrett had given him 3 minutes ago when they'd entered the room. Across the room, he saw Garrett's hand move toward his jacket pocket. On stage, Evelyn was talking about the gap between medical innovation and accessibility, about the 70 million people globally who needed assistive technology and couldn't access it because the economics had never been built around them. Her voice had a quality to it, not inspirational in the practice sense, but honest in a way that was harder to fake. She sounded like someone who'd been angry about this for a long time and had finally found a use for the anger. Logan watched the man's right hand. The hand moved. What happened next took 11 seconds. Logan counted them afterward, not in real time, because in real time those 11 seconds had the quality of something that slows and compresses the way serious moments always do, where your perception sharpens to the point that you're registering things you don't consciously decide to register. The man stood. His right hand came up and Logan saw the knife, a fixed blade, 4 inches, already open. And then Logan was moving before the man had fully cleared the table, because the trajectory was obvious, and the distance to the stage was 30 feet, and Evelyn Hayes was not looking in this direction. He covered 20 feet before anyone else in the room had processed what was happening. He caught the man at the edge of the center aisle, close enough to the stage that Evelyn's peripheral vision might have caught movement, close enough that one of Garrett's stage-side security officers was already turning, and he came in from the right side, which was the angle the man couldn't defend without crossing his own body, and he took the knife hand at the wrist. The redirect happened in a single movement: wrist control, elbow bar, weight transfer. The blade swept wide and away from the stage. Logan's right hand closed over the man's fist and torqued it outward in the way that produces immediate, involuntary compliance, and the knife hit the floor before anyone on stage had moved. The man was strong and trained. Logan felt that immediately, felt the resistance in the attempt to counter, but he was not prepared for someone who had anticipated him, and in a physical confrontation that is most of the battle. Logan took him down to one knee, right arm locked behind his back, face pushed forward toward the floor. One of Garrett's officers, a big man named Torres, who had been positioned near the stage, came in fast from the left and collided with Logan's shoulder, reaching for the man on the floor. The impact broke Logan's lock for half a second, and the man lunged, got partially upright. Logan caught him again at the collar, drove him back down, and this time Torres understood what he was seeing and stopped trying to help, and started running interference on the crowd, which was now moving, chairs scraping, voices rising in the particular confusion of 400 people trying to understand simultaneously whether they are in danger. Logan held the man on the floor. "Don't move," he said quietly, directly into the man's ear. "You're done." The man stopped moving. On the stage 5 feet away, Evelyn Hayes sat very still in her wheelchair. She had not screamed. She had not moved back from the podium. Her hands were flat on the armrests, and she was looking at Logan. Not at the man on the floor, not at the scrambling security team, but at Logan, with an expression he couldn't quite read in the moment. Not fear, not relief yet. Something more like the look of a person who has just recalibrated what they understood about a situation they thought they had mapped. Police were already coming through the main ballroom doors. Logan had heard the sirens outside 3 minutes before. He'd wondered, briefly, if they'd make it in time. He looked up at Evelyn. She was still looking at him. He released his hold on the man on the floor, put his hands flat and visible on his knees, and waited for the officers to take over, because the last thing a man in maintenance coveralls needed in a room full of panicked people and arriving police was to be standing over someone with his hands in a configuration that suggested he was the problem. Torres crouched beside him. He was breathing hard. "Who are you?" he asked. Logan didn't answer that right away. He watched 2 officers pull the man up from the floor, watched Garrett cross the room with his phone to his ear, and the expression of someone managing the distance between a catastrophe and a near miss. He watched Priya appear from somewhere near the stage curtain and say something urgent to Evelyn, who was still sitting exactly as she had been sitting, hands on the armrests, watching Logan. "I work maintenance," Logan said finally. "MT-1147. Someone should call about the device in the secondary corridor on 2 North. Torres stared at him. "The police dispatcher already knows," Logan added. He stood up, straightened his coveralls, and moved toward the wall. The hours that followed were the kind of hours that felt both very long and strangely compressed. The ballroom was cleared, calmly, efficiently, the evacuation running the way evacuations ran when the immediate threat was already contained, and the professionals were back in control. The bomb disposal unit arrived and confirmed what Logan had described: a modified aerosol dispersal device designed to release a chemical compound into the ballroom's ventilation intake. Not lethal, the lead tech said, but enough to cause mass respiratory distress, and more importantly, enough chaos to cover whatever the main event was actually supposed to accomplish. The man Logan had taken down was identified through his fingerprints as a contract operative with a history in private security that the investigators described, with impressive understatement, as irregular. The person who had hired him, and why, was not something Logan would learn about for several more days. He spent 2 hours in a 4th-floor conference room with 2 detectives, one from the city's major crimes unit and one from the FBI field office 40 minutes away, who had driven over fast enough to still be slightly out of breath when he sat down. Logan told them everything in the order that it had happened, without embellishment, without the kind of retrospective certainty that people added to stories after the fact, to make themselves sound smarter than they'd actually been. He told them about the grip on the box. He told them about the camera and the door. He told them he'd called hotel security first, and then 911, and then gone back to the corridor because he hadn't been able to reach anyone who was moving fast enough. "What's your background?" the FBI agent asked. His name was Callahan, and he had the patient, slightly tired look of someone who had interviewed a lot of people in a lot of conference rooms. Maintenance, Logan said. Callahan looked at him steadily. Logan looked back. Prior to maintenance, Callahan said. Navy. I separated in 2019. What rate? Logan told him. Callahan wrote it down without reacting, which was the correct reaction and also the only reason Logan had any confidence that Callahan was good at his job. And you didn't think that information was relevant to share with hotel security when you initially reported? Callahan asked. I didn't think it would help me get taken seriously, Logan said. I thought I was more likely to get taken seriously as a guy who noticed something than as a guy with a service background they couldn't verify in 60 seconds. Callahan considered that. Were you right? Logan thought about Derek on the phone. He thought about Garrett's expression the first time he'd looked at the coveralls. He thought about Torres asking, "Who are you?" while the man was still on the floor. Probably, Logan said. Callahan wrote something down. Okay, we're going to need you available for follow-up. Don't leave the city. I've got a daughter at school. I'm not going anywhere. He said it plainly, the way he said most things, without expecting it to land any particular way. But Callahan looked up from his notepad for a moment, something brief and human in the professionalism, and nodded once. Understood, he said. Logan left the conference room at 2:15 p.m. His shift had officially ended at 2. He walked to the supply room on sublevel 2, logged his badge out, and changed his boots because he always kept a second pair in his locker, and the first pair had spent 40 minutes on concrete floors that morning, and his left heel was starting to complain about it. He sat on the bench in front of the lockers for a moment with his hands on his knees. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya's school. Pickup reminder. 3:15 p.m. Please be on time as we have a half day today. He'd forgotten about the half day. Maya had told him on Sunday, and he'd written it on the calendar on the refrigerator, and then this morning had been this morning, and now it was 2:15 and she was going to be standing outside the school in 45 minutes. He stood up. He collected his jacket from the hook inside his locker. He thought about the knife on the floor and the way Evelyn Hayes had looked at him from the stage, and then he put that away in the way he'd learned to put things away. Not gone, just stored. Somewhere it wasn't the first thing he saw when he closed his eyes. He walked out of the hotel through the service entrance. The afternoon air was cold and bright and smelled like car exhaust and the hot pretzel cart that was always parked on the corner of Westbrook and 44th. Logan stood on the sidewalk for a moment, getting his bearings in the ordinary world. A cab went by. A woman in scrubs walked past talking into her phone. Down the block, someone was unloading furniture from a rented truck with the particular frustration of a couch that wouldn't fit through a doorway. He started walking toward his car. He was most of the way there when he heard someone say his name. He turned. Priya was standing on the sidewalk 15 feet behind him, slightly out of breath, her tablet clutched against her chest. She looked like she'd been moving fast. "Ms. Hayes wants to speak with you," she said. Logan looked at her. "She was pretty clear about it," Priya added. She said, and I'm quoting directly, "Don't come back without him." Logan checked his watch. He had 40 minutes before school pickup. "Tell her I'm available tomorrow," he said. Priya blinked. She's the CEO of—" "I have to pick up my daughter," Logan said. Not unkindly, just as a fact, the same way everything was just a fact. "Tell her I'll come back tomorrow morning. She can have 30 minutes before my shift starts." He turned and kept walking toward his car. Behind him, he heard Priya say something into her phone. Then, after a pause, a short sound that might have been a laugh, quiet, surprised, possibly the first one she'd had all day. He reached his car, got in, and sat for a moment with the key in his hand. His shift had ended at 2. He'd have to call HR about the missed clock out. There would be paperwork. There was always paperwork when police were involved. The hotel's communications team was probably already in crisis mode, figuring out what to say to the press, which meant someone in management would want statements from all staff who'd been on shift. He'd have to deal with that. He'd have to deal with a lot of things. But right now, he had a daughter who was going to be standing outside her school in 38 minutes, and she was 7. and she'd probably spent most of her half-day making something she wanted to show him, and that was the only thing on his mind as he put the car in gear and pulled out of the hotel parking structure into the afternoon light. He showed up the next morning at 6:50 a.m. Not because of Evelyn Hayes. He showed up because he was scheduled for the early shift, and because his locker still had his second pair of work boots in it, and because showing up was what he did. He'd been doing it since he was 19 years old, and standing on a Navy base in Virginia, trying to figure out how to be a person who was useful to something larger than himself. And the habit had survived everything that had come after. The deployments, the losses, Sarah's death, the years of learning how to be a father and a maintenance worker in a hotel that didn't know his name. He clocked in at 6:53, collected his cart, started his route. The hotel was different this morning in the way that spaces are different after something has happened in them. Not visibly, not in any way you could point to, but in the air, in the quality of the quiet. 3 of the 4th-floor conference rooms were sealed with police tape. A crime scene tech he hadn't seen before was working the secondary ballroom entrance, photographing the doorframe with methodical patience. The north corridor had been roped off at both ends with the orange construction barriers the hotel kept for maintenance work, repurposed now for something considerably less ordinary. Logan did his route around the sealed areas without being asked to. He knew what not to touch. At 7:40, Priya found him. She was already holding 2 coffees, which he noticed immediately because it was a specific kind of preparation, the kind that said the person holding the coffees had thought about what they were walking into and decided to come equipped. "She's in the executive suite on 12, Priya said, holding one of the cups out to him. "She's been there since 6. Logan looked at the cup. It was from the hotel's 3rd-floor cafe, not the lobby kiosk, the actual cafe, which opened at 6:30 and used beans that cost more than his hourly rate. He took the cup. "I said 30 minutes before my shift," he said. "Your shift started at 6:53. It is now 7:40. Technically, you owe her 47 minutes. He looked at her. "She did the math herself," Priya said. "She told me to tell you that." Logan drank some of the coffee. It was very good. He resented that slightly. "Fine," he said. The executive suite on 12 was not a room Logan had spent any time in. It was the kind of hotel space that existed for people whose companies paid for it. Corner windows on 2 sides, a sitting area that cost more to furnish than his car, a work desk that had been colonized by Priya's organizational system, color-coded folders, 2 laptops, a charging dock with 6 cables growing out of it like some kind of corporate coral. The suite smelled like coffee and dry erase markers and the particular focused energy of a place where someone had been working for hours. Evelyn Hayes was at the window. She wasn't looking at the city. She was looking at her phone, scrolling through something, and she didn't look up immediately when Logan came in. He stood near the door. He wasn't going to perform patience, but he also wasn't going to interrupt. He'd waited out longer silences than this in circumstances significantly less comfortable. After about 15 seconds, she put the phone face down on the windowsill and looked at him. Up close, and in daylight rather than ballroom lighting, she was different than he'd expected. Not more or less impressive, just more specific. She had the kind of face that photographers liked because it had angles that looked different from different directions, and dark eyes that were currently doing something complicated that Logan couldn't entirely read. There were shadows under those eyes. She hadn't slept much. He recognized the look. "Logan Carter," she said. "Ms. Hayes." "Evelyn." She said it like a correction she'd made 100 times. "Sit down." He sat in one of the chairs near the work desk. She rolled from the window toward the sitting area, positioned herself across from him with the ease of someone who'd stopped thinking about the mechanics of her own movement a long time ago. Her wheelchair was custom, lightweight carbon frame, a specific color that was somewhere between charcoal and navy. He noticed it the way he noticed details, without meaning to attach significance to it. "I wanted to say thank you," she said. "In person. Not through Priya, not in a statement. You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. That's why I'm doing it." She held his gaze steadily. "You saved my life yesterday." Logan was quiet for a moment. Not because he disagreed, but because there was a version of that sentence that was true and a version that was an oversimplification, and he wanted to say the accurate thing. I noticed something early enough to matter, he said. Your security team helped contain it. My security team, she said, with a precise flatness that conveyed a very specific opinion, spent approximately 12 hours telling me that everything was under control while a man was bypassing the building's security perimeter with a box and electrical tape. You reported the anomaly to hotel security at 10:17 a.m. Did you know that? Garrett pulled the call logs. You called them at 10:17 and they logged it as a minor concern. Logan didn't say anything. And then you went back and looked yourself, she said. I couldn't walk away. Why not? He thought about how to answer that honestly. Because I knew something was wrong and there wasn't going to be anyone else who would look in the right place. That's not a judgment on your team. They didn't have the same information I had. What information? The grip on the box, the way the camera was angled, the exit bypass. 3 things wrong in the same location at the same time. That's not coincidence. That's prep work. Your security team was trained to monitor a perimeter. They weren't trained to read a setup. He paused. I was. Evelyn was watching him with the focused attention of someone who listened for a living, not nodding along, not performing engagement, actually listening the way people did when they were deciding what something meant. Garrett told me you were in the Navy, she said. Yes. He was vague about the specifics. He didn't know the specifics. Do you want to tell me? Logan drank some of his coffee. SEAL Team 8, 11 years. I got out in 2019. She was quiet for a moment. Why did you leave? My wife died. I had a 6-year-old. The room was quiet. Outside the window, the city was doing what cities did in the morning. Traffic accumulating, the distant sound of a delivery truck on the street below, a siren that rose and faded without urgency. I'm sorry, Evelyn said. She said it the way people said it when they meant it rather than when they were filling a pause. It was a while ago, Logan said. Not to dismiss it, just as the fact it was. She nodded once, accepting that. And now you work maintenance at this hotel. 3rd year, almost. Is that... She stopped, reconsidered whatever she'd been going to say. That's not a judgment. I'm trying to understand the distance between who you were and where you are. There's no distance, Logan said. I chose this. I wanted a job that let me be home by 3:30. My daughter gets out at 3:15. Something in Evelyn's expression shifted. A small adjustment, almost imperceptible, like a calculation that had just come in differently than expected. What's her name? She asked. Maya. How old? 7. She'll be 8 in April. Evelyn looked at him for a moment longer. Then she picked up her phone from the side table, looked at something on it, put it down again. It was the first time she'd broken eye contact since he'd sat down, and he understood it as the unconscious move of someone who needed a half-second to collect a thought they weren't sure they wanted to say out loud. I want to offer you a position, she said. Logan waited. Not security. I have a security team. What I don't have is someone I trust to tell me when the security team is wrong. She held his gaze. I want you to be my head of corporate safety. It's a newly created role. I'm creating it specifically because of yesterday. I need someone who thinks about danger the way you think about danger. Someone who looks at a building and sees what the building is hiding. Logan was quiet long enough that Priya, who was standing near the desk pretending to look at her tablet, shifted her weight slightly. I'm a maintenance worker, Logan said. You were a SEAL operator for 11 years. That's not the same as corporate security architecture. I know what it's not, Evelyn said. What it is someone with an instinct set I can't recruit for, and a track record I watched happen 6 feet from my face. She said it without heat, clean, direct. The salary is 3 times what you're making here. The hours are structured so you have flexibility for pickup at 3:15. I have offices in this city. You wouldn't have to relocate. Logan set his coffee cup down on the desk. I'm going to need to think about it, he said. I expected that. It's not a no. I know it's not a no, she said. A no would have come faster. He looked at her. She looked back at him with the steady patience of someone who had learned how to wait for things that mattered and not apologize for wanting them. Give me a week, he said. You have a week. He stood. She didn't try to extend the conversation, which he respected. People who knew how to end a meeting were people who understood that pressing too hard on something that needed time was how you broke it. He was almost to the door when she said, "Logan?" He turned. "Yesterday," she said. "When it was happening. The knife." She paused, choosing her words with the same precision she'd use on a quarterly report. "You came from my left. You were already moving before anyone else in the room had processed what was happening. How long had you been watching that man?" "About 7 minutes," Logan said. "Once I was in the room." "That's all?" "That was enough." She nodded slowly. He could see her filing it away, integrating it into whatever model she was building in her head. He'd seen that quality in maybe 4 or 5 people in his life, the ability to take new information and let it actually change what they already thought, rather than just bolting it onto the side. 7 minutes, she said again quietly. Not to him this time, to herself. Logan left. The police investigation moved faster than he'd expected, which meant it had resources behind it that didn't usually attach to hotel security incidents. By Thursday, 2 days after the summit, Callahan called Logan's cell phone at 8 a.m. and asked if he had an hour. Logan was in the school parking lot waiting for the drop-off line to move. "I can be there by 9:30, he said. "The field office on Garrison Street, 2nd floor. Ask for me at the desk." "What's this about?" "Background on the man you detained, and some questions about your conversation with hotel security prior to the incident." "Am I in trouble?" There was a brief pause. "No," Callahan said. "You're pretty much the opposite of in trouble." Logan drove to school pickup in the afternoon, replaying that conversation, which was a thing he did. Turned things over in his mind the way you turned a stone in your hand, checking all the surfaces. Maya sat in the back seat eating a cereal bar and talking about a girl in her class named Destiny who had said something at lunch that Maya found philosophically troubling. "She said that dogs don't have feelings," Maya said. "She said they just do things." "What did you say?" "I said that's not right. Cooper has feelings." Cooper was their neighbor's golden retriever, who Maya had appointed herself the primary emotional advocate for approximately 1 year ago. "You're right," Logan said. "She said I didn't have proof." "What kind of proof were you thinking?" Maya chewed her cereal bar. "I said, when I'm sad, Cooper puts his head on my knee. He doesn't do that when I'm happy." Logan drove. He thought about that for a moment. "That's a good argument," he said. "I know." She wasn't being arrogant. She was just factually satisfied with her own reasoning, the way 7-year-olds were when they believed in what they'd said. He'd missed that quality when he'd been away. Not in a painful way, just in the way you miss something that turned out to be irreplaceable. He pulled into their parking space and turned off the engine. Maya climbed out and went ahead to the door, backpack bouncing, still talking about Destiny's epistemological deficiencies. Logan sat in the car for a moment. He thought about the offer, 3 times his current salary, structured hours, staying in the city. He turned the stone over. He checked all the surfaces. Man. The FBI field office on Garrison Street was the kind of building that had been built in the 90s to look serious, and had succeeded at looking serious while failing at everything else architectural. Callahan met him in the lobby and walked him upstairs without much ceremony. The meeting room was small and had a whiteboard with something covered by a pull-down paper sheet, the kind of deliberate obscuring that told Logan he was about to be shown something in sequence rather than all at once. There were 3 people in the room. Callahan, a woman from the city's organized crime unit named Vasquez, who had the efficient handshake of someone who'd made a lot of first impressions, and a younger analyst whose name Logan didn't catch, but who was running a laptop with 2 external monitors. "We identified your man," Callahan said, settling into a chair. "His name is Marcus Drell, 41 years old, former private military contractor. Did work in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia through a company called Iron Gate Solutions, which is a name you will not find in any public registry because it was dissolved and reformed 3 times in 8 years under different names." He paused. "Iron Gate has known associations with corporate espionage, specifically with operations targeting medical technology companies." Logan looked at him. Novatech. Drell had a contract that we've partially reconstructed from his communications. He wasn't hired to kill Evelyn Hayes. Callahan said it the way he said most things, flat, without editorializing. He was hired to incapacitate her during a high-profile public event. The dispersal device was the primary mechanism. The knife was contingency if she needed to be, and I'm going to quote the communication here, individually addressed. Who hired him? We're working on that. What we have is a financial trail that goes through 3 shell companies, 2 of them offshore. The source is a competitor company with a history of predatory acquisition behavior. Vasquez took over here, sliding a single printed page across the table. Novatech is 6 months from a major device patent filing that would significantly disrupt 3 other companies in the same market space. If Hayes is removed from the picture, professionally, legally, physically, the filing timeline collapses. Logan looked at the page without picking it up. You're telling me someone tried to destroy her career by incapacitating her in front of 400 investors? Public incapacitation, Vasquez said. If the dispersal device releases in the ballroom during her keynote, chaos, people hospitalized, Hayes potentially among them, the incident tied directly to her event. Her board loses confidence, the investors pull back, the filing gets delayed. The company either stalls or becomes vulnerable to acquisition. And the knife. If she survived the initial event and could still speak coherently afterward, Drell was there to ensure she couldn't. The room was quiet for a moment. Logan thought about the ballroom, about 400 people who hadn't known what was in the wall behind them, about Evelyn Hayes at the podium talking about accessibility and the 70 million people who needed technology she was building. She needs to know the full picture, Logan said. She's being briefed this afternoon, Callahan said. Her legal team has been in contact since this morning. We wanted you to hear it from us first because your testimony about the timeline, what you saw, when you reported it, the sequence of your actions, is going to be material to the investigation and potentially to subsequent civil litigation. Whatever you need, Logan said. I'll cooperate fully. Callahan nodded. He looked at Logan for a moment with the particular attention that Logan had noticed in their first meeting, evaluative without being unkind. Can I ask you something off the record? Callahan said. You can ask. When you went back to the ballroom, after hotel security didn't act, after you called 911, you made a choice to go back in rather than wait outside. Yes. Why? Logan thought about how to say it accurately. Because I knew where he was going to go, and I knew what he was going to do when he got there, and I was the only person in that building who knew both of those things at the same time. If I waited outside, the information died with me, for however long it took for someone else to see what I'd already seen. He paused. I didn't go back in because I wanted to. I went back because the math didn't work any other way. Callahan wrote something in his notepad. He had a way of writing that suggested he was recording something precisely rather than summarizing, the slow, deliberate movement of someone who cared about getting words right. Okay, Callahan said. That's all I needed. Evelyn called him that evening. Logan was in the kitchen making dinner. Nothing impressive. Pasta and a tomato sauce from a jar that Maya had picked out at the grocery store because the label had a picture on it she liked. When his phone buzzed with an unknown number that turned out to be her cell. I just got off a call with the FBI, she said without preamble. No greeting, no asking if it was a good time. He was starting to understand that this was just how she operated. Callahan briefed me this morning, Logan said. He turned the heat down under the sauce. Then you know what this was. Her voice was different from the morning in the hotel suite. Not less controlled, but something underneath the control was running harder. This wasn't random. Someone mapped out a 6-month strategy to remove me from my own company. Yes. They were going to do it in front of 400 people. That was the point, Logan said. Maximum visibility. Maximum impact on the board and the investors. There was a pause on her end. He could hear the ambient sound of wherever she was, a hotel room, probably still at the Meridian Grand, which struck him as a choice that said something about her he hadn't expected. Staying at the scene, not running. Are you angry? He asked, because the question seemed relevant, and because she hadn't said it, and sometimes the thing people weren't saying was the thing that mattered. Yes. No hesitation. I'm also... She stopped. I don't know what the other thing is yet. I'll figure it out and tell you when I do. That's fair. Another pause. He heard Maya in the living room doing something with her colored pencils. She'd been working on a drawing for 3 days, some elaborate scene involving horses and what appeared to be a space station, the internal logic of which Logan had stopped trying to understand. Your offer still stands? Logan asked. Silence for a moment, then, are you saying yes? I'm saying I want to know more about what the role actually looks like before I say yes. But I'm not saying no. He could hear something shift in her breathing. Not relief exactly, but the release of something she'd been holding. I can put together a full brief, she said. Scope, structure, reporting lines, whatever you need. Start with what your current security architecture looks like and where you think the gaps are. I'll tell you if I agree about the gaps. And if you don't agree? Then we'll have a more useful conversation than if I just rubber stamp your assessment. A pause. Then she said, with a dryness that he was beginning to recognize as her default mode for anything she found genuinely funny. You know, most people who are considering a significant job offer don't open with, I might disagree with your entire premise. I'm not most people, Logan said. No, she said. You're really not. Us. The next morning, he was back on his route by 6:50. He told himself it was because he hadn't formally resigned yet, and it would be unprofessional to just stop showing up. He told himself it was because the 4th floor still needed to be cleaned regardless of whatever was happening in executive suites and FBI field offices and evening phone calls that ran longer than he'd planned. Both of those things were true, and also not entirely the reason. He liked the work. He always had, though he'd never said that to anyone because it was a hard thing to explain in a way that didn't sound like he was performing contentment. There was a satisfaction to cleaning something that had been dirty, restocking something that had been empty, fixing something that had been broken. It was uncomplicated in a way that his previous career had not been, and his potential future career would not be. And he valued uncomplicated things in the way that only people who had lived through very complicated ones did. He was replacing the liner in a waste bin outside the 4th floor ice machine when Torres appeared. Torres, the security officer who'd collided with him in the ballroom, was a large man who moved with the slightly self-conscious deliberateness of someone who'd been told his whole life to be aware of how much space he took up. He was in his regular dark suit, earpiece in, and he stood beside Logan's cart for a moment without saying anything. Carter, he said. Torres. About the other day. He stopped, tried again. When I came in from the left, I broke your lock. You were doing your job. I was in your way. Yes, Logan said, but you didn't know what you were seeing yet. That's different from being incompetent. Torres looked at him. How'd you take him down that fast? Logan sealed the liner and put it in his cart. Practice, he said. What kind of practice? The kind you can't really explain in a hallway. Torres was quiet for a moment. He had an honest face, the kind that showed what it was thinking without meaning to. Right now it was showing something between curiosity and the particular discomfort of having to revise a prior judgment. Garrett wants to talk to you, Torres said. He's got some questions about what you saw in the maintenance corridor. Tell him I'll come by before my shift ends. He said this morning, if possible. Logan looked at him. Please, Torres added. He said it with the expression of a man delivering a word he didn't usually have to use. Logan pulled his cart to the next station. I'll be down by 9. Garrett's office was on sublevel 1, adjacent to the security monitoring room. It was a small space made smaller by the number of screens mounted on the wall, each showing a different camera feed. Logan sat across from him at a desk that had stacks of printed incident reports on both corners and a coffee mug that said World's Okayest Manager in a font that suggested it had been a gift from someone who thought they were being funny. Garrett looked like he hadn't slept much. He looked, Logan thought, like a man who was carrying the weight of a near miss and had been carrying it for 48 hours without putting it down. I owe you an acknowledgement, Garrett said. He said it the way people said things they'd practiced saying, not because the words were insincere, but because they'd needed to find the right ones. You don't, Logan said. I dismissed your report at 10:17. A trained operative told me there were 3 simultaneous anomalies in my perimeter, and I processed it as a civilian concern and moved on. He held Logan's gaze. That was a failure. I want to own that. Logan looked at him for a moment. He thought about what it cost a man like Garrett to say that. A professional, a career security person, saying that a maintenance worker had been right and he had been wrong. You had a full event perimeter to manage, Logan said. You made a calculation under time pressure with incomplete information. That's not a failure. That's a job with a bad outcome on one variable. One variable that almost got your client killed. She's not my client. She's going to be. Garrett said it without accusation. He'd clearly heard about the offer. And when she is, I'd like to compare notes. Not because I think you'll need my input, because I think I might need yours. Logan looked at him. Garrett held the look steadily. Buy me a coffee that isn't from the lobby kiosk, Logan said, and we can talk. Something shifted in Garrett's face. Not quite a smile. The absence of the tension that had been there. Deal, he said. That afternoon, Logan went back to the ballroom. It had been cleared and restored. The chairs were in their original arrangement, the tables reset, the stage returned to its neutral configuration with the custom low podium already removed and stored. The screens were dark. The smell of 400 people in expensive cologne had been replaced by the antiseptic and linen smell of a freshly cleaned event space. He stood near the left wall, the exact spot he'd stood in while scanning the room 7 minutes before everything happened. He looked at the place near the center-left tables where Marcus Drell had been sitting, waiting for his specific moment. He thought about the trajectory from that table to the stage. 30 feet. The distance that had existed between Evelyn Hayes and a decision someone else had made for her. He thought about what Vasquez had said. 6 months from a patent filing. 6 months of work, of the kind of focused, grinding, daily labor that built things that mattered. And someone had decided that the most efficient way to deal with it was to remove the person doing the work. Logan had spent 11 years in places where people made that calculation. It never stopped being the ugliest arithmetic he knew. He turned and walked back out of the ballroom. In the corridor, his phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Brief is ready when you are. No pressure on timing. He looked at the message for a moment. Then he looked down the corridor, at the camera above the secondary entrance, which had been remounted and recalibrated that morning by the hotel's security vendor, now pointing exactly where it was supposed to point. At the door beneath it, which was latched and alarmed and ordinary in every way, a door was supposed to be ordinary. He thought about what it meant to protect something, not just in the immediate physical sense, the knife, the 11 seconds, the body between the threat and the person who mattered, but in the longer sense, the structural sense, the kind of protection that meant building something solid enough that the 11 seconds never had to happen. He texted back, tomorrow morning, 6:30, coffee's on me. He pocketed his phone and went back to his cart. He had 3 more hours on his shift, and the second-floor restrooms on the east corridor still needed attention, and Logan Carter was not the kind of man who left a job half-finished. He brought the coffee from the place on the corner of Westbrook and 44th, the pretzel cart guy's neighbor, a narrow shop with no seating, and a hand-lettered menu board and coffee that cost $4 and was worth every cent of it. Too black, because he didn't know how she took hers, and he wasn't going to guess. Evelyn was already in the hotel's third-floor meeting room when he arrived at 6:28. She had a laptop open and a printed document on the table in front of her, and she was reading something on her phone with the focused expression of someone processing information they weren't entirely happy about. She looked up when he came in, clocked the 2 cups, and something in her face adjusted. Black? She asked. I didn't know your preference. Black is fine. She took the cup. Thank you. He sat across from her and looked at the printed document. It was an org chart, Novatech's current security structure, rendered in the clean, impersonal geometry of a company diagram. Boxes and lines, names and titles. He could see immediately where the gaps were, the same way you could see where a fence was weak if you'd spent enough years thinking about what fences were supposed to stop. Talk me through what you're seeing, he said. She turned the document to face him. Right now, corporate security reports to the CFO, not to me directly. That means every significant security decision runs through a financial filter before it gets to my desk, which means risk assessments get weighted against cost implications before I've even seen them. She tapped the chart. Event security gets contracted out on a per-event basis. No continuity, no institutional memory. The team at the summit had never worked a Novatech event before. Has there been a consistent threat assessment process? There's been a consultant who produces an annual report that nobody reads. She said it without self-pity, but with the particular flatness of someone who had discovered an embarrassing truth about their own organization. I didn't read it either, if I'm being honest. I trusted the structure to be functional because I built the technical side of the company and assumed the operational side had been built the same way. It wasn't. No, it was built the way a lot of operational infrastructure gets built, fast, under budget pressure, by people who were solving for good enough rather than actually works. Logan drank his coffee. He looked at the chart for a long moment. If I take this role, he said, I need direct reporting access to you, not through the CFO, not through any operational layer. If I identify a threat, you hear about it in the same conversation. Agreed. I also need the authority to override contracted security decisions if I determine they're insufficient. That means the ability to pull a vendor and replace them with minimal notice. That's going to create friction with the procurement team. I know. You're okay with that? I'm okay with friction, Logan said. I'm not okay with a structure where the person responsible for safety has to write a memo and wait 3 business days to fix something that's wrong. Evelyn looked at him across the table. He watched her weighing it, not the cost, but the implications, what it meant for how the company worked, what it meant for the people who'd built the current structure and would experience his access as a disruption. Done, she said. He looked at her. You didn't think about it. I thought about it for 48 hours before this meeting, she said. I just needed to hear you say it out loud to confirm I'd landed in the right place. He went back to the document. Your travel security is the next priority. How often are you in the field? 25 days a month, on average. Conferences, investor meetings, facility visits, regulatory meetings in DC. I have a standard 2-person security detail when I travel, contracted through the same firm that staffed the summit. Same firm. Yes. A pause. I know. That contract ends when I start, Logan said. I'll assess and rebuild the travel protocol from scratch. It'll take 6 to 8 weeks to have something solid. During those 6 to 8 weeks? During those 6 to 8 weeks, you reduce your public schedule to confirmed, controlled environments only. Nothing open access. Nothing where the attendee list isn't verified in advance. Her expression changed slightly. Not resistance, something more specific than that. The look of someone being told their movement was about to be limited and who had strong feelings about limited movement. I understand that's frustrating, Logan said. I've been managing my own mobility limitations for 6 years, she said, with a precision that told him exactly where that sentence had come from and how much weight it was carrying. Being told to limit my presence further is not a small thing. I know it isn't, he said. I'm not asking you to disappear. I'm asking you to give me 8 weeks to build something that means you don't have to disappear ever again. He held her gaze. After that, you go wherever you want, and I'll make it work. She looked at him for a long moment. 8 weeks, she said. Maybe 7, if your team cooperates. They'll cooperate. She said it with the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly what leverage she carried in her own organization. He nodded and picked up his coffee. They sat in the particular silence of 2 people who had just negotiated something real and were letting it settle before they moved on to the next thing. Can I ask you something that isn't about the job? Evelyn said. You can ask. The morning of the summit, you reported to hotel security at 10:17. They dismissed it. You could have called 911 immediately and waited outside. Most people would have. I called 911 after the corridor, Logan said, after I found the device. But you went to the corridor first. You went looking, alone, without backup, in a situation that could have put you directly in front of an armed operative. Yes. Why? He thought about how to answer that the right way, not the modest way. Not the way that made it sound like instinct without explanation, but the actual way. Because information decays, he said. When something is happening, the window where you can act on what you know is a specific size. If I'd gone outside and waited, everything I knew about the location of the device, the route the operative had used, the specific vulnerabilities in the security perimeter, all of that was time sensitive. The police would arrive without it. The hotel security would keep not having it. The only way to make sure it mattered was to go get confirmation fast enough that someone could use it. That's a very rational explanation for something that could have gotten you killed. Most decisions that could get you killed have a rational explanation, Logan said. That's not usually the thing that makes them hard. She looked at him. What makes them hard? He was quiet for a moment. He thought about a maintenance corridor with bad lighting and the chemical smell underneath the concrete dust. He thought about the rubber wedge under an emergency exit door. He thought about 11 seconds in a ballroom. The part where you do it anyway, he said. He gave his notice at the hotel on a Thursday, effective in 2 weeks. The HR manager, a woman named Celeste, who had processed a remarkable amount of paperwork in Logan's 3 years, and had once told him that she'd never had a maintenance employee with cleaner incident documentation, looked at his resignation form with an expression that suggested she already knew where he was going, which he hadn't told anyone. Novatech? She asked. He looked at her. The whole hotel knows, she said, not unkindly. You saved the CEO at our conference. It would be weird if she didn't try to hire you. I'm not confirming or denying, Logan said. Celeste stamped the form. Good luck, she said. I mean that. You were one of the decent ones. He thanked her and left. He stopped at the supply room and picked up his cart because he had 11 working days left and the 4th floor wasn't going to clean itself. The first time Maya heard about the new job was on a Saturday morning, which was the day Logan had designated for conversations that needed space around them. He made pancakes, not from a mix because Maya had a strong and clearly stated opinion about mixed pancakes, and waited until she'd had 2 before he said anything. She was drawing on a napkin. She did this at every meal. The napkin drawings had accumulated in a shoebox in her closet that Logan could not bring himself to throw away. I got a new job, he said. Maya looked up. At the hotel? No, different job. At a company called Novatech. What kind of company? Medical technology. They make devices that help people. Maya considered this. What would you do there? Keep people safe, Logan said. Like I was doing before, but different, more organized. She was quiet for a moment, drawing something on the napkin. He couldn't tell what it was yet. It was in the early stage where it could have been anything. Before when? She asked. He looked at her. She was looking at the napkin, not at him, which with Maya usually meant the question was more serious than it sounded. When I was in the Navy, he said. She nodded slowly. She knew about the Navy in the way that children know about things their parents have mentioned around the edges. Not fully, but enough to understand it was a real thing that had existed before her specific memory started. Do you want to? She asked. Yes, he said. And that was the part that had surprised him, actually. Not that he'd said yes to Evelyn's offer, but how clearly he'd meant it when he'd said it to himself at 6:30 in the morning, in a meeting room with a cup of black coffee and a printed org chart. He wanted to do this work. He'd been surprised to find that out about himself, as if he'd checked a room he thought was empty and found it still had furniture in it. Okay, Maya said. She went back to drawing. That's it? Logan asked. What else would I say? I thought you might have more questions. Maya looked up. Will you still pick me up at 3:15? Yes. Then it's fine. She looked back at the napkin. Can I have another pancake? He got her another pancake. His last week at the hotel had a quality he hadn't expected. Not sentimental exactly, but attentive. He paid more attention to the work than he usually did, which was saying something given that he'd always paid considerable attention. He noticed the particular weight of a full waistliner versus an empty one, the precise amount of pressure needed on the floor buffer to avoid leaving swirl marks on the marble, the way the 4th floor vending machine always jammed slightly on the 3rd selection from the left and needed a specific angle of pressure to release it. He'd learned this building over 3 years. He'd learned its rhythms and its weaknesses and its particular way of being a place where people moved through, not staying, just passing, carrying their lives through its corridors in brief transactional moments. There was something honest about that, he'd always thought. No one was pretending to be permanent here. On his second to last day, Torres found him in the corridor again. "Heard you're leaving Friday," Torres said. "Yes." Torres nodded. He had a way of nodding that communicated more than the nod itself. This one conveyed acceptance plus something he wasn't going to articulate. "You know," Torres said, "I've been in security work for 6 years, hotel, corporate, a year doing private detail." He paused. "I've seen good people do good work. I don't know that I've seen anyone do what you did in that ballroom." Logan looked at him. "I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable," Torres said. I want to understand it better, if that makes sense. Not the physical part, the decision to go back in." "It makes sense," Logan said. "So how do you—" Torres stopped. Tried again. "How do you know when to go?" Logan considered the question seriously, because Torres was asking it seriously. "You don't always know," he said. "Sometimes you go and you were wrong and nothing was there. You feel like an idiot for about 4 minutes and then you feel okay about having checked." He looked at his cart. "The ones where you don't go because you talked yourself out of it. Those are the ones that stay with you." Torres was quiet for a moment. "Have you had those?" "Yes," Logan said. "Not many. Enough." Torres nodded again, the same nod, but different underneath. "Good luck at Novatech," he said. "Thanks, Torres." He pushed his cart to the next station. Evelyn was in the city for the first 3 weeks of Logan's onboarding, which was unusual. She was typically between cities on a schedule that Priya tracked with a color-coded calendar system that Logan did not fully understand but had decided to trust. She'd cleared the time deliberately, which he understood without being told. She wanted to be available while he was building the new structure. She wanted to be part of it. They met every morning at 7:30 in the Novatech city office, a 4-floor space in a building on the west side with good natural light and a security setup that Logan had assessed in his first 45 minutes on site and immediately identified 6 things he was going to change. 6? Evelyn said when he told her. 7, actually. I was being diplomatic. "Tell me all 7. He told her all 7. She listened without interrupting, which he'd come to understand was her default mode when she was taking something seriously. Complete attention, no performance of engagement, just the real thing. She asked 2 questions, both of them precise, both of them indicating she'd been tracking details he hadn't explicitly connected for her. "When did you spot the badge reader vulnerability?" she asked. "Second floor, east stairwell. The reader has a 4-second gap between scan and lock engagement, long enough to tailgate if you're paying attention." "How long did it take you to find that?" 11 minutes. She looked at him. "It's been there for how long?" "Based on the hardware model, at least 2 years. She pressed her mouth together briefly. Not anger, controlled frustration, the kind that went inward rather than outward. "Fix it first," she said. He fixed it first. By the end of week 2, Logan had replaced the badge reader, restructured the visitor log protocol, established a new vendor assessment process for contracted security staff, and begun building what he was calling, to Priya's visible amusement, the threat calendar. It was exactly what it sounded like. A rolling 90-day view of every public appearance, event, travel leg, and media engagement on Evelyn's schedule, assessed for exposure level and annotated with his recommendations. "This is the most organized terror I've ever seen," Priya said, looking at the printed version he'd brought to a Thursday planning meeting. "It's a tool," Logan said. "It's a 40-page document with color coding. The color coding is functional. Red is high exposure, yellow is moderate, green is controlled environment." "There are a lot of red pages." "There were. I've moved 6 of them to yellow." He looked at Evelyn. "The investor dinner on the 23rd needs to move venues. The original location has a public atrium entrance that's not manageable with your current detail size." Evelyn pulled up her calendar. "That venue was chosen because 2 of the board members specifically requested it." "I know. The venue has a private dining room on the 3rd floor with a controlled entrance. If they're committed to the location, we can make that work. If they want the main dining room, we need to add 2 more people on the perimeter." "The board will ask why." Tell them it's a new security protocol following the summit incident. That's true, and it's the kind of explanation a board accepts without wanting more detail. Evelyn looked at him with an expression that he was beginning to catalog, a particular quality of attention that she deployed when he said something that matched exactly the way she thought about problems. "You've done this before," she said, the diplomatic version of a security explanation. "Once or twice," he said. "Military briefings?" "Command structures," he said. "You learn to give people the information they need to act correctly without giving them so much information that they start making decisions they're not qualified to make." Priya made a small sound that might have been a laugh. Evelyn looked at her. Priya returned to her tablet. "Third floor private room," Evelyn said. "Make it work." "Already called the venue this morning," Logan said. She looked at him. "I wanted to have the option ready if you agreed," he said. "I didn't book it without your approval." "But you were ready to." "I try to be ready for most things." She held his gaze for a moment with that specific look again, the one that was harder to read than her professional expressions, the one that existed in the space between what she said and what she was deciding to say. "Yes," she said. "I've noticed." The investigation into Drell's employer moved through its legal mechanisms slowly, and with the particular opacity of federal processes, which meant that Callahan called Logan every 10 days or so with a brief update that contained less information than he'd hoped and more than he'd expected. The third call came on a Tuesday afternoon while Logan was reviewing access logs from the Novatech building's overnight security footage, a task he'd assigned himself in addition to everything else because he didn't trust summaries when he could read the source material. "The shell company trail resolved," Callahan said. "Source is a holding company called Meridian Capital Partners. They have a controlling stake in a company called PharmaLink Devices, which is a direct competitor in Novatech's primary market segment. Have they moved to arrest? Arrest is a few steps down the road. Right now we're building the evidentiary chain. The connection between Meridian Capital and Drell's contract runs through two intermediary contacts, both of whom are cooperating. Cooperating meaning? Meaning they'd rather testify than face the charges that attach to knowing facilitation of an assassination contract." Logan was quiet for a moment. He was looking at the access log. A maintenance contractor had badged in at 2:14 a.m. on Thursday. A routine cleaning crew cleared through his new protocol. Everything in order. "Does Evelyn know the source?" he asked. "Her legal team was notified this morning." "Okay." He paused. "Callahan, when this goes public, the company name, the charges, what's the timeline?" "Indictment could be 8 to 12 weeks if everything moves as expected. Public filing makes it a matter of record at that point. She'll be the center of a significant media cycle." "Yes. Her communications team needs to be prepared." "I'll make sure she knows to prepare them." A brief pause on Callahan's end. "You're working for her now?" "Yes." "How's that going?" Logan looked at the access log. "Fine," he said. He could hear Callahan deciding whether to say something else. "She's lucky you were in that hotel," Callahan said finally. "She's not lucky," Logan said. "She builds good systems, and she was in a hotel that had a maintenance worker with 11 years of pattern recognition. That's not luck. That's a combination of variables that happen to line up. That's a very unsentimental way to describe saving someone's life." "It's accurate," Logan said. Callahan made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Take care of yourself, Carter." "You too," Logan said, and meant it. He told Evelyn about Meridian Capital that afternoon. She was in her office on the third floor, a corner room she'd set up with a standing desk at wheelchair height and a whiteboard that currently had 3 different project timelines written across it in 3 different colors. She listened to him without moving, her hands flat on the desk, her expression running through something he was learning to read as her processing mode, not blank, but inward, doing the integration work that happened when new information had to be fitted into everything she already knew. "PharmaLink," she said. "They bid on an acquisition of our precursor company 4 years ago. We declined." "I know," Logan said. "I pulled the public filing history last week." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because understanding who wants to harm you requires understanding who you've refused before," he said. Rejection creates motivation. I wanted to know who'd had reason to be angry with Novatech before this incident. How many did you find? 3 companies with acquisition history that fits the profile. PharmaLink was the most recent and the most aggressive in their approach. 2 of the others are smaller and don't have the capital structure to fund this kind of operation. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. You'd already mapped this before Callahan called. I had a working hypothesis. I wanted the FBI confirmation before I brought it to you. She looked at him with the expression he'd started thinking of as her recalibration look, the one where she was adjusting the model she had of him to fit something he'd just done that she hadn't anticipated. Logan, she said. Yes, in 3 weeks, you have changed more about how this company manages risk than 4 years of contracted security vendors changed combined. She said it plainly. Not as a compliment, but as an observation she was making out loud to confirm it to herself. I want you to know I see that. He looked at her. It helps that you actually read the reports. She made a sound, short, genuine. Is that a criticism of my predecessors? It's an observation about why the system wasn't working. He paused. A security structure is only as good as the decision maker who uses it. You use it. That makes the difference. She held his gaze. The afternoon light was coming through the corner windows at an angle that made the office feel different from its morning version. Warmer, more settled. Outside, the city was doing its mid-afternoon thing, the sound of a bus on the street below, a plane somewhere overhead, the low ambient sound of a place where a lot of people were living their ordinary lives simultaneously. Can I say something that isn't about work? She said. He waited. When I was in the ballroom, after it was over, she paused. Not hesitating, gathering. You moved to the wall. You put your hands on your knees. You made yourself as unthreatening as possible so the arriving officers would read the situation correctly. Yes. That was deliberate. Obviously. You did it because a man in maintenance coveralls standing over someone on the floor was going to be read wrong. It was the correct tactical decision, Logan said. It was also... She stopped. He watched her find the word she actually wanted. It was also a thing that should not have been necessary. You should not have had to actively manage how you were perceived at the moment you just... She stopped again. I'm not saying this right. I know what you're saying, Logan said. She looked at him. It's not a new calculation, he said. I've been making versions of it my whole life. You learn which rooms you're allowed to be dangerous in and which ones you're not. That's just... He paused. That's just how it is. I don't carry it the way I used to. Evelyn was quiet for a long time. He could see her sitting with what he'd said, not trying to fix it or respond to it, just receiving it. I'm sorry, she said finally. Just that. You don't have to apologize for other people's... I know I don't have to. She said it with the same precision she'd used the morning she'd thanked him. I want to. There's a difference. He looked at her. He thought about the first time he'd seen her through the double doors of the ballroom, a woman he'd known nothing about except that she was a guest in a hotel he was cleaning. He thought about how fast the distance between that moment and this one had collapsed. Not because of the obvious dramatic events, but because of all the smaller ones. The morning meetings, the threat calendar, the coffee he'd brought, and she'd drunk without complaint. Okay, he said. She nodded once. They sat in the afternoon quiet of an office that was beginning to feel like a place where real work happened, the kind of work that left a mark on things. The evening Evelyn met Maya was not planned. It happened on a Friday, 3 weeks and 4 days into Logan's employment, when a late vendor meeting ran past 5:30 and he'd had to call the after-school program to let them know pickup would be 40 minutes late. He'd arranged for Priya to cover the meeting's documentation so he could leave at 6, and he was in the lobby pulling on his jacket when Evelyn came out of the elevator. She was on her phone. She ended the call when she saw him. You're leaving? She asked. Not accusatory. She knew his pickup schedule, had accommodated it from the start. Late day, he said. Maya's at the after-school program. The one on Clement Street? He looked at her. He'd mentioned it once, in passing, in a conversation about his schedule constraints in week 1. Yes, he said. I'll walk out with you. She said it naturally, the way you said things to someone you'd been working alongside for weeks. And so they went out together through the building's main entrance and onto the street, which was doing its Friday evening thing, full of people leaving work, the energy slightly different from a weekday afternoon, a degree looser. They were half a block from the building when Evelyn said, "Can I ask you something?" "You keep asking me if you can ask me something before you ask it." "I'm aware of that," she said. "I do it when I'm not sure how the question is going to land." "Ask it." "Do you miss it?" "The Navy." He walked a few steps before answering. "I miss some of it. The people, mostly. The clarity." "The clarity of what?" "Of purpose. In that work you always knew what you were supposed to be doing. The how was complicated. The what was usually simple. And now? Now the what is complicated too." He paused. "I don't mind complicated." She was quiet for a moment, navigating a section of sidewalk where the pavement had heaved slightly from a tree root underneath. The kind of thing Logan noticed because he'd spent 3 years noticing physical environments. She handled it without slowing, without adjusting anything visible. "Do you think you'll stay?" she asked. "With Novatech. Long term." He looked at her sideways. "That's a different kind of question than you usually ask." "I know. Are you asking as my employer?" "No." She held his gaze. "I'm asking as—" She paused, and he watched her decide how to say it. "I'm asking as someone who has spent most of the last 6 years keeping people at a functional distance and is finding that unusually difficult in this specific case." Logan was quiet. The street around them continued its Friday evening business, indifferent to the conversation happening on its sidewalk, the way cities were indifferent, which was one of the things Logan had always liked about them. "I'm staying," he said. She looked at him. "That's not an answer I gave because you asked," he said. "I'd already made it before today. I just hadn't said it out loud yet." She was quiet again, and in the quiet, he could see her doing that thing she did, taking new information and letting it actually change something rather than filing it away for later. It was the quality he'd liked about her from the second morning in the hotel suite, and it still struck him the same way, as rare and as worth paying attention to. They were at the corner of Clement Street when he saw Maya. She was outside the after-school building with her backpack on and her coat half-zipped, holding a paper project of some kind that she was trying to keep from bending in the wind. She spotted Logan from half a block away and started toward him at the particular speed of a 7-year-old who had been waiting longer than expected and had feelings about it. "You're late," she said when she reached him. "I know. I'm sorry." Maya looked at Evelyn with the frank, unguarded curiosity of a child who hadn't yet learned to perform social neutrality. "Who are you?" she asked. "Evelyn," Evelyn said. She said it the same way she said it to everyone, the correction, the first name, offered without ceremony. "That's my dad's boss," Maya told her, as if clarifying for Evelyn's benefit. "I am," Evelyn said. "You must be Maya." Maya considered being surprised that this woman knew her name and visibly decided it wasn't that surprising. "Yes," she said. She held out the paper project, which turned out to be a watercolor painting, a house, a tree, a figure that was presumably Logan, identifiable primarily by height and the splash of gray Logan recognized as an attempt at his work clothes. "I made this. We had art today." Evelyn looked at the painting seriously, the way she looked at things she was actually considering. "The tree is good," she said. Maya examined it. "I know, the house is a little wrong. The door is too big." "Maybe it's a big door," Evelyn said. Maya looked at her, then she looked at the painting again. "Maybe," she said, in the tone of someone giving the idea a fair hearing. Logan watched this exchange with his hands in his jacket pockets, and something quiet moving through him that he didn't try to name. It wasn't the absence of grief. Sarah's absence was not the kind of thing that went away. It was something that existed alongside it. Two things in the same space, which was, he'd learned, how most of the true things in life worked. "I should let you both get home," Evelyn said. She looked at Logan. "Monday, 7:30. "I'll have the revised travel protocol ready," he said. She nodded. She looked at Maya. "It was nice to meet you, Maya." "You too," Maya said. She was already pulling Logan by the jacket sleeve toward the parking structure, the painting tucked carefully under her arm. "Dad, can we get the soup place tonight? Not the one with the bread, the other one. The one on Harrison?" "Yes, with the noodles." Sure, Logan said. He looked back once. Evelyn was still at the corner watching them go, and when she saw him look back, she didn't look away or make it into something small. She just looked, with the honest attention she gave to everything she decided was worth looking at. He turned back to Maya, who had opinions about the soup and the noodles and the specific table she wanted to sit at, and walked with her through the Friday evening city that was loud and indifferent and full of people carrying their lives through it in brief, ordinary, irreplaceable moments. The indictment came down on a Wednesday morning in early March, 8 weeks after Callahan's last update, and it arrived the way most significant things arrived in Logan's experience. Not with drama, but with a quiet that was more complete than the noise that had preceded it. He was in the Novatech office, 3rd floor, reviewing the updated access protocol for the DC regulatory trip that was scheduled for the following week, when Priya knocked on his open door and held up her phone. The news notification was already pulling the story. Meridian Capital Partners, PharmaLink devices. 4 counts of criminal conspiracy, 2 counts of solicitation, 1 count of attempted murder under federal statute. 3 executives named in the filing, including the company's founder and majority shareholder, a 61-year-old man named Gerald Foss, who had, by all publicly available accounts, spent 4 decades building a medical device empire and had apparently decided somewhere along the way that building things was slower and more expensive than destroying the people who built them better. Logan read the notification. He read it again. "She knows?" he asked. Callahan called her directly at 7:15, Priya said. "She's been on with the legal team since." "How is she?" Priya considered the question with the honesty she applied to most things. "Controlled," she said. "You know how she gets when she's processing something big." He did know. He'd watched it enough times in 8 weeks to recognize the specific quality of Evelyn's stillness when something large was moving through her. The way she got quieter rather than louder. The way her focus contracted rather than scattered. "I'll check in after the legal call," he said. "She asked me to tell you she'd like to talk after," Priya said. She said, quote, "not about work." Logan looked at his access protocol document. He folded it closed. "Tell her whenever she's ready," he said. She found him at 11:40, which meant the legal call had run almost 4 hours. She came to his office, a smaller room than hers, on the same floor, with one window that looked out at the building's interior courtyard rather than the street. He'd set it up simply. Desk, 2 chairs, a whiteboard he'd already covered with the threat calendars next quarter. No decorations except a drawing Maya had made that he'd taped to the wall beside the window, the one with the maybe big door. Evelyn came in and looked at the drawing for a moment before she said anything. "Is that the one she made the day we met?" she asked. "Yes." She looked at it a moment longer. Then she positioned herself across from his desk, and he could see immediately that the controlled quality Priya had described was still there, but thinner now, like a surface that had been under pressure for 4 hours and was showing the strain. "It's over," she said. "The legal part is just starting," Logan said. "But yes, the threat part is over." She nodded. She looked at her hands, which were in her lap still. "Boss," she said. "I met him twice. Industry events. He was charming in the way that people are charming when they've decided you're not worth taking seriously yet." She paused. "I suppose eventually I became worth taking seriously." "You built something that threatened him. I built something that was better than his." She said it without ego, just the flat accuracy of someone stating a technical fact. And his response to that was to try to have me incapacitated in front of my investors. She was quiet for a moment. What does that say about what a person can become when they've spent 40 years being the one who's never threatened? Logan thought about it honestly. It says that some people build things because they love building, and some people build things because they can't stand being outbuilt. When the second kind meets someone better, they run out of road. She looked at him. "Which kind are you?" "I'm the kind who fixes things," Logan said. "I don't have a lot of ambition beyond making sure the thing I'm working on works the way it's supposed to." "That's not a small thing," she said. "I know. I'm not being modest. It's just what I am." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked away, out of the window at the courtyard below, where someone from the building's ground floor tenant was eating lunch on a bench with the specific contentment of a person who had no idea they were being observed. Ordinary life, doing what it did. When I was 24, Evelyn said, and I woke up in the hospital after the accident, the first thing I understood, before I understood most of it, was that the version of the future I'd planned was gone. She said it without the weight that people sometimes put on such things, performing their own damage. She said it the way she said most things, as information. Not modified, gone. I had to build a new one from where I actually was, rather than from where I'd expected to be. Logan listened. I spent about 2 years being angry about that, she said. Then I spent about a year figuring out what was actually still possible, which turned out to be more than I'd thought. And then I started building. She paused. Novatech wasn't a plan. It was what happened when I stopped planning and started doing the thing that was right in front of me. The thesis, Logan said. The thesis, which was really just a very long answer to a question I had about my own situation. Why was the technology that might have helped me harder to access than the technology that had nothing to do with what I needed? She looked back at him. I built it because I needed it to exist, and then other people needed it too, and then it became what it became. And now someone tried to take it apart because it became too much of what it became. Yes, she was quiet. That's the thing I keep turning over. The better you build something, the more it threatens the things that weren't built as well. And the people who built those lesser things, they don't always decide to build better. Sometimes they decide to destroy what's better instead. Logan thought about that. He'd seen it in different contexts and at different scales, but the mechanism was always the same. People who'd built their identity around being the best at something running out of room when the something changed around them. It didn't make them sympathetic. It made them comprehensible, which was a different and sometimes more useful thing. It didn't work, Logan said. She looked at him. Whatever he planned, Logan said. Whatever Foss thought he was going to accomplish by removing you from the board's confidence at the moment your company was most visible, it didn't work. The patent filing is still on track. Your investors are still in. The only thing that changed is that 400 people watched you not flinch, and that story has been running in the business press for 2 months. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. He could see her considering whether to accept that or push back on it. I almost flinched, she said. At the podium, when I saw the movement in my peripheral, I almost pushed back from the microphone. Almost, Logan said. You were already moving when I saw it. Yes. How much of that is... She stopped. How much of what you did that day do you think about? He considered lying by omission, which would have been easy, and chose not to. More than I thought I would, he said. Not the physical part, the 7 minutes before. Whether I could have moved faster. Whether I should have pushed Garrett harder after the first call to hotel security. Would it have changed the outcome? Probably not, but that's not really how those thoughts work. She looked at him with the particular quality of attention she gave to things she was storing rather than just processing. Is that... She paused. Is that something you've dealt with before, after operations? Yes. Do you have someone you talk to about it? He looked at her. Is this you asking as my employer or as the other thing? She didn't look away. The other thing? I have a therapist I see every 2 weeks, he said. I've been seeing her since I separated from the Navy. She's the reason I function like a relatively normal person rather than... He paused, finding the right description. Rather than someone who's running on the fumes of unprocessed experience and wondering why the engine keeps seizing. Something in Evelyn's face shifted, small, genuine. I have one too, she said. Tuesday mornings. I've seen her for 4 years. She's the reason I stopped treating every professional relationship like a transaction I needed to win. Logan looked at her. I'm telling you that, she said, because you told me something real, and I thought you should get something real back. That's fair, he said. The office was quiet. Outside, the lunch bench person had finished eating and gone back inside. The courtyard was empty now, just a rectangle of gray pavement and 2 bare trees that would have leaves on them in another month. Logan, Evelyn said. Yes. I want to say something that I've been deciding whether to say for about 3 weeks. He waited. He'd learned that with her, waiting was the right thing. She arrived at what she actually wanted to say faster when she wasn't being moved toward it. I haven't trusted many people, she said, in my professional life, in my personal life. After the accident, I decided, not consciously but effectively, that the safest way to function was to require very little from other people and offer enough in return that the relationship balanced without getting close enough to be... She paused. Without getting close enough that losing it would matter. That works for a while, Logan said. It works for longer than you'd think, she said. And then it stops working, and you're 30 years old running a billion-dollar company and eating dinner alone 4 nights a week and thinking that's just what building something looks like. Is it? He asked. No, she said. I think that's what fear looks like when it's been in charge long enough to convince you it's just your personality. Logan was quiet. He thought about his own version of that. The hotel corridors, the early shifts, the deliberate ordinariness of a life engineered for presence and safety. He thought about how long it had taken him to understand that shrinking into something smaller wasn't the same as healing, even if it felt like protection. I know something about that, he said. I know you do. She held his gaze. That's why I'm saying it to you and not to someone else. The thing about conversations that mattered was that they almost never felt the way you thought they would when you imagined them. They felt smaller on the surface and larger underneath. They felt like an ordinary Tuesday in an ordinary office with 2 cups of cold coffee on a desk and a child's watercolor painting on the wall. I'm not going anywhere, Logan said. It was the second time he'd said a version of that to her, and the second time he'd meant it in more than one sense. She looked at him for a long moment. Her hands were still in her lap, and in the particular stillness of them, he could see that she'd made some decision or arrived at some shore she'd been navigating toward. Good, she said. Just that. But the patent filing landed on April 3rd, which was a Tuesday, which was also 11 days before Maya's 8th birthday. Logan knew the date because Evelyn knew the date. She'd noted it in the margin of the previous week's planning calendar with no comment, which was the kind of thing she did instead of making something out of things she'd noticed. The filing moved through its initial review without the delays the legal team had braced for, because the company's documentation was thorough, and because Evelyn had spent 6 months making sure it was thorough, and because whatever Foss had hoped to derail by removing her from the equation had not in fact been derailed. The technology stood on its own. That was the point. That had always been the point. The morning the confirmation came through, Logan was in a planning meeting with Garrett, who had, over the past 2 months, become something that functioned like a professional peer rather than an obstacle. Their 2 frameworks for thinking about security finding enough common ground to build on. They developed a combined protocol for Novatech events that Logan thought of as structurally honest. It didn't rely on the appearance of security, but on the actual mechanisms of it, which were less impressive looking but considerably harder to circumvent with electrical tape and a rubber wedge. Priya knocked and came in without waiting, which she only did for specific categories of news. It's filed, she said. Garrett looked at Logan. Logan looked at the planning document in front of him. He thought about a maintenance corridor with a chemical smell. He thought about a camera pointed at the wrong angle. He thought about 7 minutes of watching a man at a conference table with his right hand curled under the surface. Good, he said. He turned back to the planning document. Garrett, the South Entrance Protocol, you were saying the badge reader response time was still running long. Garrett blinked. Then he picked up his own document. Yeah, half a second over spec. I've got the vendor coming in Thursday. Make sure they test the East Stairwell reader at the same time. They're on the same firmware loop. Already on the list, Garrett said. Priya looked between them with the expression of someone watching 2 people speak a language she was still learning. That's it, she said. The patent that someone tried to have your boss killed over just filed and you're talking about badge readers? Logan looked at her. The badge readers matter every day, he said. The patent is done. We move on to what's next. Priya considered this for a moment. I don't know if that's admirable or alarming, she said. Probably both, Logan said. No. Maya's birthday party was on a Saturday at a community center 3 blocks from their apartment because Maya had specifically requested a space with enough room for an obstacle course, which Logan had spent 2 evenings building from supplies that had arrived in several large boxes and required significantly more assembly than the product description had implied. He'd finished it at 11:15 the night before, sitting on the community center floor with an instruction sheet in 3 languages and the distinct feeling of a man who had diffused more complex problems and yet somehow found this one more exhausting. Evelyn came. He hadn't asked her, Maya had. She'd called Evelyn's cell number, which she had because she'd asked Logan for it 3 weeks earlier, on the grounds that she might need to talk to her, and Logan had given it to her without asking why because the expression on Maya's face had been the particular one that indicated she'd already decided, and she'd said, in the direct manner that was apparently simply her personality, "My party is April 14th. It starts at 2. You should come." Evelyn had told Logan about this call approximately 30 minutes after it happened. She'd told him while trying very hard to maintain a neutral expression and failing in a specific way that he'd come to understand as her version of being genuinely moved. "She called you," Logan had said. "She did. And you said yes." "I told her I would try," Evelyn said. "I didn't want to commit without checking with you." Logan had thought about it for a half second. "Come," he said. So she came. She arrived at 2:15, slightly late because the parking situation near the community center was exactly as complicated as Logan had warned her it would be. She had a wrapped package that turned out to contain a set of professional-grade colored pencils, the kind that came in a metal tin with 120 colors, each one labeled in 3 languages, and a sketchbook with heavy enough paper to handle watercolor. Maya opened the tin with the reverence of someone receiving something they'd wanted without knowing to ask for it. "These are the real ones," Maya said. "They are," Evelyn said. "How did you know I draw?" "Your dad mentioned it." Maya looked at Logan. He had, in fact, mentioned it, in the context of explaining the shoebox in the closet to Evelyn during a conversation that had started as a work debrief and had gradually migrated somewhere else, the way their conversations increasingly did. "The paper is thick," Maya said, examining the sketchbook. "It handles wet media, watercolor, gouache. You can use the pencils wet too. Dip them in water, and they bleed like paint." Maya looked up. "Did you know that already, or did you look it up?" Evelyn held the look. "I looked it up," she said. "I wanted to get something you could actually use." Maya absorbed this information. "That's good," she said, with the same satisfaction she'd had when she'd confirmed her soup preference was correct. "Thank you." "You're welcome, Maya." Logan watched this from approximately 6 feet away, near the table with the birthday cake that had been specified in considerable detail by the birthday person and had been executed by a bakery 3 blocks from the apartment that Logan now gave a lot of business to. He was holding a paper cup of juice that was too sweet, and he didn't care. He was watching his daughter show Evelyn the obstacle course with the proprietorial tour guide energy of someone who'd had a large hand in its design, even though her large hand had mostly consisted of standing nearby while Logan assembled it and issuing corrections. There were 12 other children at the party. There were 6 other parents, several of whom Logan knew from pickup line conversations, and one of whom, a father named Derek, whose kid was Maya's closest friend at school, had taken one look at Evelyn and begun doing the mental calculation that Logan recognized as the beginning of several potential conversations he was not interested in having. He moved to stand closer to Evelyn preemptively, which was not a thing he'd planned to do, but which his body apparently decided was the correct response. Evelyn noticed. He could tell by the slight shift in her posture, not away from him, the opposite. "Are you running interference?" she said quietly, while Maya demonstrated the tunnel portion of the obstacle course to a group of children who were not as interested in the tutorial as she was. "I don't know what you mean," Logan said. "The father by the cake table has been trying to figure out whether to come over here for the last 4 minutes. I haven't been tracking him." Logan. 3 minutes, maybe. She made the sound that was her genuine laugh, short, low, slightly surprised at itself, the one she didn't perform. He'd heard it maybe 15 times in the past 2 months, and he'd learned to value its rarity. "I can handle introductions," she said. "I know you can." "Then why?" "Because it's Maya's party," he said, "and I don't want the next 45 minutes to be a networking event." She looked at him. Then she looked at the cake table, where Derek was still hovering with the studied casualness of someone who'd made a decision and was waiting for the right moment. "Fair," she said. He stayed where he was. Derek eventually got a piece of cake and went back to his kid. The party ended at 5. The cleanup took 40 minutes. Maya fell asleep in the car on the way home with the metal tin of pencils on her lap and her head against the window, the way she'd been falling asleep in cars since she was small enough that Logan had to carry her from the car seat to her bed. He carried her now too, though she was heavier than she used to be, and she woke up halfway to her room and said, "I can walk," in the sleepy automatic voice of someone defending their independence while barely conscious. He put her down and she walked the rest of the way under her own power and got into bed still partially dressed, and he pulled the blanket up and turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment. Evelyn was in the living room. She'd helped with the car, held the door, carried the leftover cake box, navigated the building's front steps with the fluency of someone who'd long since stopped treating accessibility as a problem to be solved in front of other people. She was looking at the refrigerator calendar when Logan came back. The calendar had the month laid out in his handwriting, appointments, pickup times, the occasional note. Maya had added drawings in the margins. There was a small horse in the corner of April 14th. "She drew that this morning," Logan said. "She said it was for good luck." Evelyn looked at the horse. It was small and slightly lopsided in the way of most drawings by someone who is still learning that the thing in their head and the thing on the page are related but not identical. "It worked," Evelyn said. He stood beside her in the kitchen. The apartment was quiet in the way apartments were quiet when a child had just fallen asleep. Not empty, but settled. The leftover cake was on the counter. The kitchen light was the kind of warm that kitchens got at the end of a long day, when the work was done and there was no particular reason to be anywhere else. "Can I ask you something?" Logan said. She looked at him with a slight shift in her expression, recognizing the phrase he'd borrowed from her. "Ask it," she said. "The party today, was it—" He paused, finding the right version of it. "Was it too much? The noise and the—" "No," she said. It came out quickly, more quickly than her usual measured delivery. She adjusted. "No, it was—" She looked at the calendar again. The horse in the corner of April 14th. "I don't have a lot of—" She stopped. "I don't do a lot of this. The ordinary kind of thing. Parties and kitchens and cake boxes. I do events and conferences and dinners where the conversation is always about something that's supposed to matter. And this?" She looked at him. "This matters more," she said. "That's the thing I keep learning. The things that are supposed to matter. The patent filing, the indictment, the investor deck. They matter because of what they make possible. But this is what they make possible. This kitchen, this calendar, that horse." Logan looked at the horse in the corner of the calendar. It was slightly lopsided. It was also somehow exactly right. "I know what you mean," he said. He did. He'd known it for a long time, since before he could have articulated it, since the first morning after he'd separated from the Navy and driven Maya to a park and sat on a bench watching her run and understood, without having the language for it yet, that this was not a consolation for the life he'd given up. This was the life. The bench, and the park, and the child, and the ordinary morning. This was what everything else was supposed to be in service of. The trouble was that knowing it and living it were two different skills, and you had to practice both. "I want to tell you something," Logan said. She waited. "When I took this job, when I said yes to you in that hotel suite, part of what I was deciding was whether I could do this kind of work again without it taking the thing that mattered most." He said it carefully, because he wanted to say it right. "I'd built my life around being here, present, available, for Maya, but also just for myself, for the version of myself that exists when I'm not running on mission parameters." "And?" she said. "And I was wrong to think I had to choose," he said, "between the work and the life. I'd been treating them as competing things for 4 years. It turns out they don't have to be." She was watching him with that attention, the full kind, the kind that didn't wander. "I think the version of you that picks up his daughter at 3:15 and makes dinner and tapes drawings to office walls," she said, is not separate from the version that spent 11 years as a SEAL and reads an entire building's security vulnerabilities in 45 minutes. I think that's just one person. I'm starting to think so, he said. I've thought so since the first morning in the hotel suite, she said. When you told me about Maya before you told me about your service record. He looked at her. That was the order, she said. I asked about your background and you told me your daughter needed to be picked up at 3:15. That was the first thing. He hadn't known she'd registered that. He'd said it without thinking, the way true things came out when you were too tired to edit. I guess that's who I am, he said. Yes, she said. That's exactly who you are. They stood in the kitchen for a moment, in the warm quiet of an evening that had earned its quietness. Outside, the city was doing what it always did, indifferent and continuous, full of people carrying their lives through it the way they always had. Logan had stopped thinking of that indifference as cold. It was just the nature of the container. What you put inside it was yours to determine. Stay for a bit, he said. Not as a question exactly, more as an offering, the way you offered something when you were ready to have it accepted. She stayed. The weeks that followed had a different quality than the ones before them. Not easier, not without the ordinary friction of two people learning the specific language of a new kind of closeness, but more honest. They were honest with each other in the way that people were honest when they'd both decided that the cost of pretending was higher than the cost of the truth, which was a decision that took most people much longer to make, and which both of them had arrived at through routes that hadn't been gentle. Logan rebuilt Novatech's safety culture the way he'd always worked, methodically, without fanfare, fixing the thing in front of him and then the next thing. He trained Garrett's team on threat recognition at the granular level, the way pattern awareness worked, what a prepared environment looked like versus an improvised one. He ran tabletop scenarios that made the security staff uncomfortable in productive ways. He revised the contractor vetting process so thoroughly that Priya told him he was going to put 3 vendors out of business, and he told her that was fine, that the vendors in question had been selling the appearance of security rather than the substance, and those were different products. Evelyn went back to full schedule after the 8-week reduction. Logan had her travel protocol updated, her venues pre-assessed, her detail rebuilt with people he'd selected himself and trained to the standard he required. She went where she needed to go. She did the work she was built to do. She did it with the particular confidence of someone who had stopped spending energy managing the fear that something might go wrong and had redirected that energy into the thing itself. That was the thing people didn't understand about real security. Logan had learned over years of doing it. It wasn't the absence of threat. Threats were always there. It was the freedom that came from knowing the system around you was solid enough that you didn't have to carry the threat yourself, that you could put it down and pick up the work. He watched her do that. He watched her put it down and pick up the work, and he understood what it cost her to trust that the system would hold, because trusting systems was not the thing she'd been built for. She'd been built to build them, not to lean on them. Learning to lean was a different education. She was a decent student. He told her that once, in the middle of a planning meeting that had migrated into something else, and she gave him the look that meant she was deciding whether to be amused or annoyed and had landed somewhere in between. A decent student, she said. Above average, he said. I was being conservative. You're never conservative. I'm always conservative, he said. I just know where the real risks are, which makes me look bold in the places that don't matter. She looked at him for a moment. That might be the most accurate thing you've ever said about yourself. I have my moments. Maya's relationship with Evelyn developed the way Maya's relationships developed, on her own terms, at her own pace, with the frank and unhurried quality of a child who had decided what she thought about someone and wasn't going to pretend otherwise in either direction. She liked Evelyn. She had decided this early and saw no reason to complicate it. Evelyn, for her part, learned things from Maya that she hadn't expected to learn from a 7, almost 8-year-old. She learned that the maybe big door explanation was actually better than the correct explanation because it left room for imagination. She learned that when someone showed you their drawing, the right response was to look at it seriously first and compliment the part that was actually good rather than the whole thing at once. She learned that some questions didn't have answers and were better finished with maybe than with I don't know. She told Logan these things in the quiet moments, the evenings when the three of them had dinner at the apartment or the soup place on Harrison, the Saturday mornings when Maya's schedule aligned with Evelyn's, and they ended up in the same room by the low-friction logic of people who'd stopped overmanaging their own proximity. She told me today, Evelyn said one evening, while Maya was in the other room, running through her colored pencils with the systematic attention of someone cataloging an important resource, that the reason horses have big eyes is so they can see the whole world at once and know if something is coming. Is that true? Logan asked. Close enough, Evelyn said. I looked it up afterward. She paused. She said it like she'd known it for years. She read it in a book about animals 6 months ago, Logan said. She tells it to people like she discovered it herself. Evelyn smiled. Not the professional one, the real one, which was slightly asymmetrical and came with a small crease beside her right eye. I know where she gets that, she said. Logan looked at her. The thing you discovered, she said, about choosing this, about building a life rather than running one. You tell it like you always knew. I didn't always know, he said. I know you didn't. She held his gaze. That's what makes it true. There was a particular evening in late May when Logan understood, not for the first time, but in the final way that things become understood when they stop being surprising, that his life had become something he hadn't planned and couldn't have planned. They were on the roof of the Novatech building, which had a small terrace that wasn't in the building's official amenities list, but which Logan had discovered during his initial security assessment, and which Evelyn had promptly claimed for any meeting that required actual thinking rather than perform productivity. The evening was warm in the tentative way of a city in late spring, still capable of going cold, but trying. The sky was the specific color it got when the light was leaving, but hadn't left yet. Maya was there, because it was a Friday and school was done, and she'd come to the office with Logan for the last hour of the workday, and spent the time drawing at Priya's desk while Priya worked around her with the resigned affection of someone who had lost control of their workspace and decided to enjoy the company instead. She was drawing now, on the terrace, sitting cross-legged on the concrete with her sketchbook open, working on something she hadn't shown anyone yet. Logan and Evelyn were at the low wall at the terrace's edge, side by side, looking at the city doing its end-of-Friday thing below them. I got a call from Callahan today, Logan said. The sentencing recommendation? Boss is looking at 12 to 15 years. The two executives named with him are cooperating, which might reduce their exposure, but locks in the evidentiary record for the primary charges. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. 12 to 15 years, she said, for a 61-year-old man. Yes. Is that? She paused. Do you feel anything about that when you hear that number? He thought about it honestly. I feel something closer to tired than satisfied, he said. Not because it's not just, it is, but because he spent all that time and all that effort and all that money to stop something that didn't need to be stopped. He could have just built better things. He paused. I feel tired for the waste of it. She looked at him. Not angry? I was angry in October, he said, when Vasquez laid out the full picture, when I understood it had been planned over 6 months. He looked at the city. Anger burns clean, and then it's done. What's left is mostly just sadness, I suppose, for what drives a person to that. I feel something similar, she said, though mine took longer to get there. She paused. My therapist would say I'm processing, which she says about most things, and which is usually accurate. Tuesday mornings, Logan said. Tuesday mornings. She smiled sideways. She asked about you last week. He looked at her. About me. She asks about things that are new in my life. You're new in my life. What did you tell her? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Below them, the city rumbled on in its continuous and indifferent way, and the sky shifted another degree toward dark, and somewhere nearby a gull went over with the particular sound of a bird that had wandered too far inland and was working its way back. I told her, Evelyn said, that I'd figured out the difference between letting someone in and losing control of the situation. Logan looked at her. I'd always treated them as the same thing, she said, because if you let someone in, they have access. And if they have access, they can affect outcomes you've worked to control. And I've been controlling outcomes since I was 24 because that was the only thing that made the world feel manageable. She said it without flinching. She'd gotten good at saying true things about herself without flinching. He'd watched her practice it. And what I told her was that you don't actually take control away. She paused. You make things more controlled. You make me feel more secure, which is the opposite of what I expected, because I expected that needing someone would feel like vulnerability. Doesn't it? Logan asked. Yes, she said. But it turns out vulnerability and danger aren't the same thing. I spent a long time thinking they were. He was quiet. He understood that completely, from his own direction, the way he'd spent 4 years treating presence as the alternative to risk, not understanding that presence was its own kind of courage. The choosing to be somewhere, to stay somewhere, to build something in one place, rather than keeping every option open, was as brave as anything he'd done in a uniform. Maya, Evelyn said quietly. He followed her gaze. Maya had looked up from her sketchbook. She was watching them with the open, unguarded attention of a child who had not yet learned to look away from things she found interesting. What? Logan said. Nothing, Maya said. She went back to her drawing. What are you drawing? Evelyn asked. Maya considered whether to answer. She decided yes. She held up the sketchbook. It was the three of them, rendered in the distinct and confident style of Maya's current artistic period, figures that were more impression than portrait, defined by color and proportion rather than detail. Logan was the tall one on the left, done in gray and brown. Evelyn was in the middle, her wheelchair suggested by 2 curved lines and a quality of sitting that was somehow exactly right. Maya herself was on the right, smaller, with what appeared to be a horse beside her. The horse is Cooper, Maya said. I added him. Cooper is the neighbor's dog, Logan said to Evelyn. I know who Cooper is, Evelyn said. She was looking at the drawing. Is it okay? Maya asked, with the directness of someone who wanted an honest answer. It's very good, Evelyn said. She said it the way she said things she meant. Maya looked at the drawing for a moment. Then she looked at Evelyn. You're in the middle, she said, because that's where important people go. Logan looked at his daughter. Maya had already gone back to drawing. There was a moment, just that. A moment, unremarkable in the way that the truest moments were unremarkable, quiet and ordinary in the middle of an evening in late May on a rooftop terrace above a city that didn't know or care, in which Logan understood that the life he was living was not the one he'd planned after losing Sarah, and not the one he'd planned before her, and not anything he could have designed from the outside. It was just the one that had become true when he'd stopped running long enough for it to catch up. He'd spent years thinking that protecting people and being present for the people he loved were things that had to take turns. He'd been wrong about that. They weren't competing. They never had been. They were the same motion, pointed in the same direction, asking only that you stay where you were and pay attention. The city spread out below them in the last of the light. Evelyn was beside him. Maya was drawing something new. The evening was warm, not quite warm enough, which was the best kind of warm. The kind that made you stay because leaving would be too cold and staying was exactly right. Logan Carter stayed. He had learned, finally, that staying was the bravest thing he knew how to do.